Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will call this meeting to order. I'm going to say a few remarks as we go along. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I am Peyton Jamison, Chairman. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan, and plan map and other related plans and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I'm going to introduce some of our board members today. To my left is Fred Edwards, Garyl Burchett, Paul Moore, and to my right is Mark Bittner and Noel Carpenter. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains with the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action is made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of their respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised and notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. in the Council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outbursts. Please turn off all cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the Milton zoning ordinance, you are required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay. There are no exceptions. With that being said, I will now call for general public comment. This is anything that you wish to speak about that is not on the agenda in front of us. Robin?
So I have one card. It's
Okay.
Dawn Hausfeld.
Yep, if you just state your name and address. Oh, whoops. What? Oh, yeah. No, that's, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight about the form-based code for Arnold Mill, and I will be brief.
If you just state your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Donald Hausfeld. I am part of the Georgia Golf Center on Cox Road. The reason for me addressing you this evening is that we started, and the document that I gave to you, if you have the maps right before you, shows a group that had a working spirit. Our interests are different because of where we're located within that activity node, but you'll see there that combined we have a working effort of 50 acres. Rather significant, and you see the orientation of those properties to that activity node. We are not here to discuss architectural. We understand that is the right of living in the city of Milton, and we've seen what's happened in Crabapple. We're not really here to talk about densities this evening. The reason for us to bring this to your attention is that we started this project November 12th at the very first meeting over at the church on the corner of Cox Road and State Route 140. And this group hung together for over a year now, both working with staff, presenting ideas, waiting for the form-based code to be able to come out. Okay? And we never at one time pushed the density. We listened to staff. We talked about what those projects could be, and the whole idea behind it in those meetings that we had that formulated the visioning study was that was an activity node that was going to take some pressure off of downtown Crabapple. It could be a good, Hamlet is a good word for it, but a live, work, play. And it was our idea for our project to tailor that towards empty nesters. Empty nesters are the least impactful to an area. They have disposable income, all the things that you already know. The surprise that we received when we received on the 16th, just 6 days ago, is when we looked at the given right for each of our parcels in reference to the TDRs. In Crabapple, for instance, for the T3 and the T4, you're looking at densities of 3 units per acre and 5 units per acre, a given right. In our section, it was 1 unit per acre and 2 units per acre as a given right. The difference being is that when you have 3 to 5 units per acre, there is an economic viability of your property without having to go out in the marketplace and negotiate, which is a commodity at this point, which is a TDR. That puts an unnecessary burden on the property owners. And I might add, if you look on that front page that I gave to you, the number of years that people have owned and operated, and in my case, actually lived on the property. And it's a very neat property. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We will bring the facts forward at a later date, but we are not really disputing anything at this point other than the fact that we need to have the base density allow for us to at least be able to develop it and to have some flexibility to develop it as we've presented to staff over the last year without having to go out in the market and, in essence, bid for those increased rights to be able to build a project that we've already presented and I might add was accepted enthusiastically. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. All right, Robin, action minutes, do we need to defer those?
Yes, staff's asking for a deferral to the May meeting, please.
Okay. Have a motion? Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead and close public comment. Have a motion for the deferral?
Sure. I move we accept the deferral of the action minutes to the next scheduled planning commission.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay. And then we need to add a social media presentation first on the agenda.
Which I do believe I have it on the revised.
Oh, it is?
version. Yes.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then never mind. Okay.
Hello, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody in the audience. I know this is unscheduled, but we're trying to get all of our boards and volunteers, in addition to city staff and elected officials, because the City of Milton has a new social media policy, and we just wanted to tell you some of the aspects of it, answer some questions if you have any, because it is a little bit different than maybe what you're used to. A lot of private industry has it, so we're just trying to be a little bit proactive, because basically what we're being told is that the next 5 years of HR problems in city government is going to come from social media use. So, just to, as I'm talking about this, I just kind of want to set a baseline of what I'm talking about. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, but then also blogging tools like Tumblr, Blogger, Snapchat, and actually for the purpose of this discussion, texting, because the courts see texting much in the same way that they see social media use, and that you're using a mass communication device to send information over, federally mandated networks. they provide you an opportunity to interact with people throughout the world. So why do we need this policy? Well, because everybody has a cell phone now. There's, I think, more cell phones than people now. So due to legal concerns, we have to have this policy. Some places are seeing harassing, demeaning, or hostile work environments. We don't really have that here because we've got good folks. But where inadvertently some people are running into is harming the goodwill of the people or reputation of the city. So who's covered? Our elected officials are covered. They have some slightly different coverage than staff does. Appointed board members and, of course, staff. And then keep in mind, and this is a very important thing, this is on or off duty. Unfortunately, in 2015, there is no, oh, I'm on Planning Commission and these are the things that I say on Planning Commission, and then, oh, that's my other social media presence. You don't understand, I wasn't a Planning Commission member at that time. Unfortunately, those two personas have to jibe at all times. So the big concepts. The city is not responsible for any unofficial posts. That just means that the city manager has given you the authority to post on behalf of the city. Myself, Angela, Kathy, JC, Sean, and Stephen from police, Jamila, Mark, and Bob from fire, and then Wayne does his own Better Together page. And this is an important one. If you're speaking about Milton-related issues on your personal social media, you just have to make it clear that you are posting as yourself and not in your official capacity as the City of Milton volunteer or board member. This disclaimer that we've got right here, when we get everybody trained, it's going to go out in an email. It's basically just going to be a little bit.ly link that you can throw in your Twitter about, your Facebook about, Instagram about. It'll come with instructions on how to do that. And according to the city attorney's office, this gives everyone just a little bit of coverage, that their words can't be construed as official opinions of the city of Milton. So one big thing, you have to conduct yourself with professionalism online. You have to assume that everybody knows you work with the city of Milton 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So everything you post has to be consistent with how you wish to present yourself as a city of Milton professional and appropriate with the public trust associated with your position. That's a very important part there, that last bit, the public trust associated with your position. So let's do that again. You have to use common sense when you're using social media. You don't want to post anything embarrassing or that you wouldn't want to see in the newspaper or television. If a story comes out about you related to Milton, we want it to be local official loves cats. Nothing more than that. So third time's the charm.
Okay.
Everything you write is public. Nothing will ever go away because even if you try and delete it, someone somewhere will screenshot it and will keep it. And this will come back to bite you. I speak from personal experience. And so everyone always asks about the First Amendment, and absolutely everybody is covered by the First Amendment. However, the courts have defined that there are some things that are not protected, like hate speech, libel, which is impugning someone's ability to make a living, accusing them of a crime for which they've not been convicted, accusing them of a loathsome disease, sexual harassment, bullying, obscenity, that's a big one. Threats, that's another big one. And protected health information. This is really important for our folks in the public safety area, but I know, personally and knowing everybody who's on boards and stuff, the police officers and the firefighters. And you talk to them, oh man, what was that big fire over there? What happened over here? And, unfortunately, you can't reveal any confidential information that you learn because you volunteer with the City of Milton. So you can't, for example, if you get in a fight with somebody on Facebook, you can't say, well, you know what, the fire department told me that you have a loathsome disease. You can't say, I've seen the finance records and I know you can't pay your taxes. Unless you open records requested them, I guess. But and then you can't say, ignore his inane rants, I learned he beats his kids. So just a few final things. You don't want to tie any personal business ventures to the city. So like for myself, I couldn't have, Milton's best employee consulting where all I talk about is, well, look at all the work I've done for Milton. You should hire me, right? This is an important one. And this is really more a matter of personal choice. We are recommending to our employees and our board members that to keep yourself safe, you might not want to post Milton logos or material on your social or blog. And that is because of interesting interactions with Georgia's Open Records Act. So if you post something about yourself being a board member on Facebook or Twitter, portions of that feed are now subject to the Georgia Open Records Act. And if nothing else, they're discoverable in court. Right? So where we have issues with this is, let's say you're a firefighter or a police officer and your profile picture is you in uniform, right? Well, then the rest of your feed could really come back to bite you if it's got, you're okay if it's like, oh, that was a tough loss for the Falcons. But if you're saying something like, Matt Ryan is terrible, we should go to his house and beat him to death, you're going to have some problems because that's going to be a terroristic threat. And there are absolutely cases of that. I'll tell you one. Kurt Schilling has a daughter who plays college softball. And she worked real hard and got a full ride scholarship for playing softball. So Kurt Schilling congratulated his daughter in the way that he knew she would see it, which is social media, because she's a digital native, she's a millennial. And unfortunately, though, a bunch of New York Yankees fans thought it would be hilarious to go on and tell Kurt Schilling exactly what they'd love to do to him and his daughter, right? What they didn't count on was Kurt Schilling tracing where they work, where they go to school, what boards they're on, where they volunteer, and forwarding what they had said to those boards and those places of employment and saying, I just wanted you to know that you've hired this person and this is what they're saying about my daughter. So a lot of people got fired. A lot of people got removed. A lot of people got kicked out of school. And oh yeah, one more thing. Trying to have some fun out there. Says Grumpy Cat. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm glad you guys laughed. Most of the time it's been kind of like, oh my God, because the party's pretty much over with social media. I mean, people have figured out, especially with public officials, go and find some piece of information that stands in contrast to their professional demeanor and expose, right? And it's very, very easy to take all sorts of stuff out of context. So a lot of people have been, reeling. Oh my gosh, could they use this? Could they use that? So we wanted you guys to be aware of it and be aware of the implications of sharing things from the city of Milton on your personal lives. So are there any questions that you guys have? Anything I can help you with? And let me, before I finish with that, please understand that Georgia's laws regarding social media are easily a decade behind, if not more, which puts it at about 2005. So that predates wide use of Facebook, YouTube, maybe LinkedIn. I'm not really sure. No Twitter. This stuff is moving so fast, and the telescoping nature of technology is that it's going to keep going faster and faster and faster. So we're trying to be proactive because there's a lot of enterprising lawyers out there and folks who would love to contribute to Georgia case law in regards to social media use, especially where it concerns government officials, public tax dollars.
Any questions for Jason?
Okay. Folks okay?
Yep.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jason.
And I thank everybody for taking the time out for me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, Robin.
Okay.
Next item.
Any of that was.
The next item is RZ 1510 to amend Article 7, Division 6, Section 64-1141, single-family uses as it relates to lot coverage.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, we are proposing an amendment to the item that covers pertains to lot coverage for individual lots. And we currently have one on the books that essentially says that lot coverage shall not exceed 20% for each individual lot in zoned AG1, R2, AG1, R1, R2, and CUP. And we are proposing that this be changed from 20 to 25%. So it will read that lot coverage shall not exceed 25% for each individual lot in the single-family zoned areas. And that's because we had it at 20%, but we did have several homes that come through that could not meet that requirement. And so the council asked us to look at the possibility of having the community development director have the flexibility to allow for an additional 5% on a case-by-case basis when needed. We did pursue that proposed change with our city attorney, And our city attorney said unless we had very definitive criteria to allow me to retain some flexibility from the 21 to 25% range, that he strongly recommended that instead that we go for just a flat 25%. So that's what we are proposing to you tonight. In addition, though, the Birmingham Crossroads Overlay District, which is really a subset of the rural Milton overlay, has its own controls on it. And so you see that we've added language there that says lots within the Birmingham Crossroads Overlay District are not required to meet the above 25% lot coverage. That's because they're small lots, and in many cases, they will exceed that. So that's excluded from this requirement, and this is what we're proposing this evening.
Okay. Do we have any public comment or questions on this from the audience?
I don't have any public comment cards.
I think Julie's
Oh,
gonna
I'm sorry.
fill one
I
out.
didn't have it yet. Oh.
Thank you. I didn't realize that this was going to involve the Birmingham overlay and specifically a subset of the rural overlay. So my question would be that within the portion of the overlay that deals with the Birmingham Crossroads, there are some lots on one of those 4 quadrants that actually are not small. There are some AG1 1-acre parcels. So I want to be very certain that we don't set into motion some unintended consequences, because the most recent zoning, which was a modification to that quadrant, was very specific and ensured that the AG1 1-acre minimums would remain in place. And so I would ask that until we have further review, that 25% absolutely not be removed, and in fact that the 20% remain in place for the Birmingham specific portion of the rural overlay. This has not been something that's been vetted at all in the community. So that would be concerning, because that 20% on the margin of those quadrants was what would allow for transition very naturally back to a more rural landscape. So there is some concern with that.
Okay.
So,
Can you have your name and address, just for the record?
I'm so sorry. Yes, absolutely. Julie Zonner Bailey, 255 Hickory Flat Road, Milton, Georgia, 30004. And I will fill this card out and make sure it's part of the record.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So again, I guess just to be certain, I would ask that not be a change that be adopted as part of the Birmingham overlay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any other comments, Robin?
No, there's not.
All right, we'll close public comment. All right, questions for staff?
Robin, did you want to make a comment?
Okay, so I have the zoning ordinance in front of me, and there's 2 ways that we can solve it. One is that the actual AG1 portion of that development is not within the Birmingham Crossroads overlay, it's just south of it. Even though it was a part of the zoning, it's not part of the overlay. But if you feel more comfortable, we can just amend to Ms. Zonner Bailey's suggestion. We could just say lots within the Birmingham Crossroads overlay districts are not required to meet the above 25%, except those that are zoned AG1. But I have a map in front of me, and it shows that area is not within the Birmingham overlay. So,
Except those
Well,
zoned AG1, Robin?
right, yeah. But reality is, I mean, I guess there could be some areas that are still AG1 that could be done as 1-acre lots, excluding that portion that she spoke about. So if you want to just keep your belts and suspenders, we can add that, except for parcel zoned AG1 within the Birmingham Crossroads.
Okay. In the point 1, where you're asking us to go from 20 to 25 per the mayor and council's request, I mean, how many of those are we actually dealing with? How many have come before us?
Well, we're seeing them in the Manor and in Hayfield.
Okay? That's it?
So thus far, that's been, and obviously the Manor is a much larger development than the Hayfield,
Right.
but I think there's probably been maybe 4 or 5 in the Manor that haven't, that have had issue, and maybe 2 or 3 in Hayfield.
So the issue is they just want to build too big a house on a smaller lot, right? That's the case.
And we
And this
have,
goes back to my, the soapbox I stand on all the time, which is, if this were something that were citywide, and it was really a problematic issue, where you were inundated with requests, I could see the need for this kind of a request and solution. But if it's a one-off, and it's a handful of things, and once again, we're being asked to write policy or ordinance that is so specific, it's just not, and that's not what our ordinances are here to serve. It's here to serve the greater community. So we're being asked to make an exception that, was, the original ordinance was contemplated, and it was written for a reason the way that it was. And if somebody wants to build that large a home, they need to buy the property appropriate to accommodate the square footage. If they don't have the lot size, they can't build a house. If they buy enough lot, they can build the house. That's my 2 cents.
You say this wording change was recommended by the council.
It was initiated by the council to work with the property owners.
Okay.
any other questions for staff? This 20% has been in the book since inception, correct? Okay.
What's that?
The 20%, I mean, it's been in,
It's about a year.
no, the 20% has only been,
It's about 9 months. I
so
think it
what,
was-
okay, so what was before? What was before that?
Nothing, there was no lot coverage.
Oh, there was no lot
No.
coverage.
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
What's the coverage allowance in Fulton County right now for an AG1 lot?
They don't have any lot coverage that that I'm familiar with, so there isn't one.
Okay. A couple of comments about that. First of all, I believe that they do, and we should do the research on what's allowed in Fulton County before we make a change like this. Secondly, I think one of the reasons why we did not approve these changes before, and when we discussed it about those specific conditions in there, was because we felt that it did not support the more restrictive issues where we're going in conservation. It's actually going in the other ways. And so for that purpose myself, I really couldn't support something like this, making this change. Additionally, I think it is, we haven't started talking about the conservation subdivisions yet, but I think it's going to have direct ramifications. Once we get to that, on the coverage issues there, it's going to allow a wider disparity on the lot coverage allowed on an AG1 versus where we're going to go with these smaller lot, possibly in that respect. So before we get to, I think if this is going to be something we're going to consider, I think we should consider it after we've considered this conservation subdivision, because I just don't think we should complicate the issue more before we do that.
Any other discussion? All right, open up for a motion.
I move we deny RZ 15-10 to amend the Article 7, Division 6, Section 64-1141, single-family uses that relates to lot coverage based on the discussion this evening. And we revert back to the original language.
I second that.
A motion by Paul, second by Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? That's unanimous.
Okay. The next item is Chapter 50, Article 5 of the City Code, Conservation Subdivision Ordinance. Joe?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. We have our two consultants here to give you a presentation to start the discussion on conservation subdivision. As you know, we have planned for this to be sort of an introductory meeting to the topic, and then you will see this topic also appear on next month's agenda for your consideration. So with that, I would like to introduce to you John Broussard and Bruce McGregor, who are the two consultants who we've hired. They are colleagues of Randall Arndt. As you know, approximately 6 months ago, we did have Mr. Arndt here to give us a presentation on conservation subdivisions, and then this proposed ordinance before you is a follow-up to that workshop in terms of implementing an ordinance of this type. And so I believe Don is ready. He has a PowerPoint presentation that he's prepared to review with you. So without further ado, let me introduce Don Broussard to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Field. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, it's a pleasure for me to be able to be here with you all tonight and with my colleague Bruce McGregor, and give you a quick overview of where we stand with the draft conservation subdivision ordinance. The ordinance, as you can see, let me find my target here. Hang on, I'm not checked out on these, on the high tech. The ordinance we have, and some of this is for the benefit of our citizens who may be in attendance tonight, who may be seeing some of this for the first time. Conservation subdivision design, the Cliff Notes version, it's the golf course subdivision without the golf course. What a number of planning observers, most particularly Randall Arndt, began to observe in the 80s and 90s was a tremendous desire for, as you all recall, a boom in golf course subdivision development around the United States. And lo and behold, market studies began to show a fair number of the people buying into the golf course subdivisions really didn't play golf, but they liked being out on that having a nice view of that fairway. So the concept began to evolve that why don't we just do a subdivision that has ample green space. The several benefits, of course, flow from that. One is that you can put very critical environmental areas or historic parts of attractive land and protect it. It doesn't have to be developed. The other side benefit of it is that you can, with the density neutral concept, you really can get the same number of lots in if you're willing to downsize the lots from what your conventional suburban zoning usually gives you. So that's the ethic behind conservation subdivisions in a nutshell. Our local example in the metropolitan area of Atlanta that we have referred to in a number of cases is Serenbe in South Fulton County. Serenbe began being acquired and developed in the late 90s, managed to persevere through the recession, and today represents an excellent example with about, I think 60 or 70% conservation land as it stands now, and uses the other, interestingly enough, for the city of Milton and for our purposes, uses community wastewater treatment. More about that in a minute. Here's an overview of the draft conservation ordinance as it stands today. 60% of the total subdivision tract and the buildable lot area of that tract would be required to be placed in permanent green space. The intention is to protect that 60% from development in perpetuity. Subdivision remains density neutral in that it is density is set with respect to the current zoning on the property and with the other prevailing regulations, most notably soil septic suitability. The key element in the process is that the developer submits a yield plan. That's a conventional subdivision design. It's a sketch plan, lightly engineered, that basically establishes the benchmark density for what the project would get. So you do a conventional site plan, subdivision design, and that sets your base density for the project. And then in the course of the next steps, you end up identifying where the critical green space areas need to be, then where the house lots need to be, then where the streets and roadways need to be. Right now, the ordinance has a provision for a 100-foot minimum setback around the perimeter of the tract. So houses would not be up right on the edge of the subdivision border. Lot dimension standards. Currently 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. If you have lots of that size, you cannot have more than 50% of the lots in the subdivision of that size. The minimum lot width. It's a very generous 30-foot minimum width. Obviously, most lots would not have 30-foot widths. 10-foot minimum front yard setback. Again, these are all minimums. Houses would probably be located at a further distance. 2,000 square foot minimum heated floor area per dwelling unit. And the 20-foot height limit. And that limit is measured from finished grade of the project to the eave of the roof. I'm going to get these buttons down yet. Infrastructure improvement. Community wastewater systems would be the norm instead of individual septic tanks. The reason for that is our AG1 zoning, which is 1 acre minimum zoning, and our Fulton County health standards that pretty much require a 1 acre lot for a lot to be built upon. It takes 1 acre to satisfy their requirements for septic tank, conventional on-site septic tank suitability. You can't do a conservation subdivision with 1 acre zoning if you cannot reduce the 1 acre minimum lot below that 1 acre. The approving agency therefore shifts to Georgia Environmental Protection Division. And that is the current situation, by the way, here in not only the city of Milton, but in Fulton County and throughout the state of Georgia. Septic systems, or more proper term I should be calling this, community wastewater treatment systems, or anything other than a conventional on-site septic system, would currently go through approvals with the Georgia EPD. That's the rule right now. Rural road standards. Our street standards would be slightly more narrow. In those streets, we would have 2 street widths, one where parking is restricted, on-street parking is restricted, and that street width would be 22 feet. Where parking is provided on the street, that width goes up to 26 feet. So you've got 2 travel lanes plus a full 8-foot parking lane for a total curb-to-curb width of about 26 feet. The good news about this, without curb and gutter, these roads look like rural roads, and that's the intention. And with the densities we're talking about, you really don't need curb and gutter in most cases. Again, there is some discretion there in the Public Works Director's department there. Bottom line, less paving is less stormwater runoff. That's a good thing. The key plans that a developer would have to submit: site analysis map that looks at the existing conditions on the site, maps any wetlands, any floodplains, steep slopes, gets a general topo, identifies any existing buildings, anything that might be historic. That becomes the basis of all the other subsequent planning documents, such as the yield plan, as we mentioned, the plan that basically sets your density, and then the actual conservation subdivision concept plan. Once you've got the density, you can then identify those 60% green space areas and then put the houses and the streets in. That gets submitted to Community Development and Public Works. The other key part of this process, which everyone who you talk to in this, who have done this, have been involved in these ordinances, says that on-site visit by the decision makers, whether that be staff or planning commissions in some places, those 4 steps are the key. You got to be able to get out there and look at the land, have some maps and plans in front of you, and walk the track to see really where are the areas that we need to conserve and where are the areas that should be accessed, and where are your surrounding developments that need to be taken into consideration. Just a quick application to AG1. As an example, a 40-acre AG1 site that had perfect land. It was all septic suitable, could handle septics on every site. Assuming that you have about 8 acres of that 40 acres that would be devoted to right-of-way on the yield plan, that would leave you 32 acres of buildable land, roughly 32 one-acre lots. 60%, the 60% green space requirement would be applied to that 32 acres, giving you a 19-acre green space requirement that would be satisfied. The developer gets the balance of that land to place the 32 dwelling units, the 32 lots. And those lots, again, shrink down in size proportionally. There's your conventional yield plan. There's a little cartoon of what you normally would get. Cul-de-sacs, loop road, lots everywhere, lots that have, in this case, have a stream and some floodplain and wetlands here in the back of some lots. That's the kind of situation that conservation subdivision is designed to protect in a better fashion, rather than having it the back of someone's buildable lot with no protection other than county or state or maybe federal regulation. By putting that kind of area into a common area green space, that really gives it a better level of protection in which the community itself can police things. There's an example of the kind of road layouts we're talking about that would allow some alternatives to cul-de-sacs that are on more narrow widths and that are on more that allow more narrow turning radiuses. And again, because the design speed of these roads is lower than our conventional local roads. Again, 6,000 square foot minimum lots, limited to 50% of all lots proposed, would allow a variety of lots within that range. Wastewater treatment. Community treatment systems would have drain fields that are placed in the green space common areas. Georgia EPD, through its general permit and individual permit processes, are available to all applicants instead of the county health department. Community wastewater system looks something like this in diagram fashion. You basically have each house with a line going to a collector line, which then is either gravity fed or pumped into a central collection system, and then pumped into a pre-treatment tank or series of tanks, and then is fed into a leach or drain field system. Again, that would all be open space down here. That would be somewhere in the green space. And the lines we're talking about here that you see connecting these dwellings, those aren't 8-inch conventional sewer lines. Those are small diameter drain lines that are on the order of 4 to 6 inches, something like that, maybe even less than that. Yeah, 2 to 3 inches. So they're pumps. They're pump systems that scattered throughout the development, and it gives the kind of efficiency that you don't get with a septic system, with individual septic systems. And that is because of the pre-treatment process that's indicated by that box there. There's a wastewater plant control building. That's its end. That's the road to service it. And that's what a wastewater dispersal field looks like. It's a pasture that you can graze cattle or horses on. So we've got a good model. We know it can be done. And we know one thing. If the development community were to embrace this process, the City of Milton would be able to benefit from 60% green space. Essentially 60% of every tract developed in AG1 zoning would be undeveloped in perpetuity. That's a pretty good trade. That's 100 times better than what we've got now in terms of green space, except for a couple of your community unit plan ordinances where you all are able to negotiate these types of protections. This would be an automatic kind of protection that would be the norm. That seems to me a good trade for the city of Milton, if we can put that together. So with that, I'll be available to answer any of your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Robin, I guess we have a lot of public comment.
Yes, and if anybody else has come into the audience since we started, if you want to turn in any comment cards, if you'd like to speak on this topic. We do have several comment cards as well as letters that we've received through the last couple of days. I will go ahead and...
Well, I just want to make one quick announcement. I just want everyone to know that we won't be voting on this tonight. This is purely to answer all the questions we've received from the community, to put everything into the light of day, that we can look at this as best as we can to guide the city in the right direction. So there won't be a vote taken. We've received all of your input, and we're here to get all the answers to your questions.
So I'll go ahead and start. As I said, we received several emails, and I forwarded them, made sure that all the planning commissioner members received them as was requested. I'm just going to go through them and call out their name. There's quite a few of them. Some of them are quite lengthy.
Are you going to do the ones in for first or against, or is it kind of a...
Let me go ahead and do, some of them are neutral,
Okay,
some of them
okay.
are, so I'll just go
Okay.
through it. Some just had comments. Kim Horn had various comments on it and some concerns with some different parts of it. Then there's Miss Carol Lane of 14890 East Bluff Road, and they see it as a possible problem with adopting the conservation subdivision. The next one is Belinda Shook, who is opposed to the conservation subdivision ordinance. Lena Lee also made some general comments about it. Sally Cavalier has also made a comment that she's concerned with some of the details and wanted additional input from the public. Donna and Jim Bonfiglio, 13250 Bethany Road, that they also had concerns with the ordinance to be discussed tonight. And then Mike Parisi is also concerned with several items of the ordinance, proposed ordinance. And Jason Cornell as well has expressed some issues with the conservation subdivision. And Curtis Mills as well has submitted a letter stating his concerns with the conservation subdivision. So that's
can we start with, I guess, people in favor, I guess?
They haven't really indicated whether they were
Okay.
in favor or not. There's some support. Let's see, support. Okay, the people in support said they were in support.
Okay.
So we'll just take it from there.
All right.
There's a couple people. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take the people in support since they said it. The first person is Jack Linden. I'm sorry, how do you want to go ahead and do
Let's
the
do
normal
10.
10 minutes
Yep.
each side?
Mhm.
Good evening. My name is Jack Linden. I live at 14810 East Bluff Road in Milton. And I'm here tonight to say that, first of all, that I'm strongly in favor of the concept of conservation communities and in the use of conservation subdivision ordinances to promote them. I think the primary benefits of these kinds of conservation communities are numerous. Things such as the preservation of open space and view sheds and wildlife habitat and other ecologically sensitive land. These are the sort of things we've talked about a lot, and they're sort of obvious. And all of these things together will go a long ways, I think, towards preserving the rural character of Milton, which is one of our major concerns. I think the most important single benefit that I want to mention tonight is the financial one. And I feel that this is financially beneficial in three different ways. First of all, the people that buy property in conservation subdivisions, there have been numerous studies done that show that those properties appreciate in value far, far greater, far faster than the properties in regular subdivisions. And of course, with the preservation of the rural character of Milton and the view sheds and the open space, I feel that it's going to significantly improve the value of Milton in general, and all the landowners in the city will see an increase in their values because of this kind of an approach. And lastly, I think that the developers are the ones that are going to really make a killing out of this, because this really is a way that they can produce lots and houses that are far more valuable than in the standard subdivisions. There have been numerous studies that show these benefits, and I plan to be providing evidence and that data to you over the course of the next few weeks. Having said all that, as you've heard from some of the comments that Robin made about the emails you've seen, there are a number of issues that need to be worked out with this and carefully examined. The currently proposed subdivision ordinance, I feel, and I know a number of other people I've talked to feel, has a number of defects that need to be addressed in order for us to avoid some really serious unintended consequences. And one of the, I think, interesting things about this is that you may be aware that the consultants produced a document that was, I think, 18 pages long to start with, and that document was then modified by the Community Development Department, simplified and turned into the 8-page document that we have now. So there's obviously a lot more in that original document than is in the existing ones. Some of those simplifications are certainly reasonable and justified, but others, I think, make it difficult for us to know exactly what is going to happen with some of the consequences of some of the issues, such as setbacks and community septic systems and the like. And I think those need to be addressed. Now, I know that members of the Milton Grows Green Committee have committed to me that they are willing to work very hard over the next 5 weeks to help with this whole process. I know that in five weeks from tonight, you'll be having your next meeting on the 27th of May to vote on this issue. And we want to provide you with as much evidence as we can for the changes we'd like to see made in the Conservation Subdivision Ordinance. And in that vein, I would like to make a request. I would hope that you could, I know you guys have got all the time in the world, so I'm going to make the request that you put some time aside to have some meetings with various interest groups in the city, like MGG and others. I think that we can have some very interesting points of view to discuss with you, and I think this might be a good way to get to a final version of the ordinance that could be beneficial to the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Laura Rencher.
I apologize. My printer decided not to work today, so I'm going to be reading off my laptop. My name is Laura Rencher. I live at 1060 Birmingham Road, Milton. I'm the president of Preserve Rural Milton, and our board is definitely supportive of conservation subdivisions. And we're more than willing to help in any way to further the discussion, to add information.
The main thing I wanted to point out tonight is that I was kind of surprised in the purpose of this ordinance, because perhaps the most important purpose of the ordinance was left out, and that is that it's a critical component of the City of Milton's conservation plan. Our plan to address preservation of open land within the city. It's essential that the Planning Commission, elected officials, and the citizens of the community understand this. The plan recommends conservation of 400 acres, with 1,000 of that from conservation subdivisions. According to the city, at the present time, there are just over 11,000 acres of land left undeveloped in the city. The number of acres of land on plats of 20 acres or more, which is what we're going to have to use if we're going to use community septics, is only 3,200 acres. So basically, if we cut that in half, we can figure out how much the potential saving is. And that's really not much. We're talking 60%. If we were using a 50% figure, it would be 1,600 acres. So there's no question that we've got to figure out how to get this thing used. It cannot be an optional ordinance. If we continue to see development occur at the rate we're at, all of the undeveloped land will become 1 acre lot subdivisions within the next 10 to 15 years. So we're really in trouble. Our city is moving toward this reality at a very rapid pace. Unless we make a choice to make a profound change that is more thoughtful and proactive than what has been done in the past, that's where we're going to be. We cannot stop all development, but we can shape it. If the percentage of land conserved is at 50%, we could save 1,600 acres of land. Green space will be retained. Green space will be retained all over the city at no cost to the city or the community, and the city would benefit from better designed developments which are consistent with the city's rural character. Preserve Rural Milton represents several thousand people who want to see the city address the need for land conservation. This ordinance is an important piece of doing exactly that. The current draft of the ordinance lacks a tremendous amount of detail needed to make it effective, and we have a lot of work to do to get it where it needs to be. There are many people who are skeptical and afraid of this ordinance, but I'm not. I and many others are working together to get the facts, become knowledgeable, and propose informed solutions. Every person I've consulted has acknowledged that this is critical to get the ordinance right. Conservation subdivisions have been used successfully across the country. I'm confident that we can use the model here in Milton to help us find the right balance between development and preservation of our city's rural character. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So please, if I'm calling your name and you want to be in the support category, just let me know. But otherwise, it's on the opposite. Is Matthew Mitchell?
Is there anyone in support left? Okay.
We don't have a middle section, so we can add you.
I'm going to speak in support,
Okay.
but I need more than 2 minutes.
Okay, we'll
We'll kind of see where
Okay.
we'll see where we're at.
okay. Okay, why don't you just
Start.
the middle person. Why don't you come on up and then, oh, he was supporting.
He got 2 supports.
Are you in, okay.
He was.
I know.
So who's next in support?
Okay. Yeah, I
He's the
have to
middle.
go through, in support, after Matthew
Yeah.
is, support.
Right.
There's no more, yeah,
But these are in support.
support.
The
Okay.
new folks.
Okay, let's
he wants
call.
to get his-
Yeah, let's go. We got 2 more minutes
Okay,
left.
okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
sorry. Okay, sorry, Howard. Howard Carson.
Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name's Howard Carson, 3082 East Shadowlawn Avenue, Atlanta, Georgia. I am in support of this ordinance because I think conservation subdivisions can be a really cool thing, but you guys have to be really careful about how you do it. And I admire Kathy and her staff for undertaking this. But it's a lot more complicated than an ordinance like this can envision. The biggest problem with these, and I speak to this from the experience of having bought a subdivision out of the foreclosure mess of a few years ago that had a private sewer system, which was a mess. If you have public sewer to serve these things, they're great because you really can use that public sewage system and preserve the developable parts of a piece of land into what this young lady wants. However, for a medium-sized piece of land, a private sewer system is a nightmare waiting to happen. I saw 2 of these happen up in Forsyth County. Your city attorney knows them well because he had to do a lot of work to clean those up. When things are going great, everybody's paying their bills, things just go wonderfully. However, when the economy turns down, that little management company that's managing a 30-lot subdivision septic system, they start having problems. Instead of showing up once a week to maintain those systems, maybe they go every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or every month. And all of a sudden you've got leaks from those systems going into your creeks. And this city council is going to have 30 people sitting at a city council meeting saying, you force these systems into our neighborhood, you're going to fix it. And this city council is not going to want to be in that position. For a large 200-lot subdivision where you've got tens of thousands of dollars a month coming in to maintain that system, it works also. Look at Serenbe, perfect example. Big subdivision, a lot of cash flow. Even though Serenbe did go broke, I have to point out, they work great in a large subdivision or even like 2 or 3 houses that share some little septic system. But in a medium-sized 20, 30, 40-lot subdivision, it's an accident waiting to happen. I love the concept of a conservation subdivision. And I'd love to talk to anybody that wants to hear my own experience with cleaning up the mess of a private sewer system. Because I don't have to speak about theoretical. I can tell you exactly what happened. And the EPD can't stop it. They can permit it. They can make you put up bonds. They can make you find trustees. But unless there's a city or a county municipal sewer authority that's willing to take that responsibility to maintain that system, you guys can't make sure that it gets maintained. And I like I said, I support the concept, but its application in a medium-sized subdivision is almost impossible, which is why the speaker before me is exactly wrong. It's a great concept. It's a great way to conserve land, but it can't be mandatory. It should be a tool to entice people to do some cool things, but it shouldn't be mandatory. It should be, because I'm the guy that, Rick Morrig, City Councilman Morrig, lives in a subdivision I developed 15 or 20 years ago. I want to see the people. I've been developing land in North Fulton County for over 30 years now. I want to see the people that live in my subdivisions 20 years from now without having to hide from them. And when I go put in these low-pressure sewer lines that are dumping into septic tanks and their system's failing 10 years from now, my cell phone, I've had the same cell phone number since 1987, my cell phone's going to light up. And I'm going to say, this city council forced me to do something I didn't want to do. Whose phone's going to light up then? And then lastly, not to...
I just want to do a time check. Robin, what's the time? What do we got?
He's gone 3
minutes
over.
And just the last...
So that's 13 total? Okay.
Just the last issue. Again, I support these things. Part of the reason people come to Milton is to have a yard for their kids to play in. And granted, this green space can serve that purpose. But if you tell me that the person that's coming to Milton to buy an $800,000 house on a 1-acre lot where he's got 100 feet between him and his neighbor is going to pay the same $800,000 for a house on a 6, 8, 10, 12,000 square foot lot where he's 50 or 60 feet from his neighbor, it isn't going to happen. Just not going to happen. So to take issue with the other supporter of this, and it's kind of odd to be in support of something but talking against other people that spoke for it.
I'm going to have to interrupt one more time. How many more people in support do we have, Robin?
One more.
Just
Okay.
last thing.
Okay.
2 more.
I think it's going to be just the opposite. The city of Milton is going to end up with houses that aren't as valuable, which means less tax revenue to the city.
Right.
Support it, great idea, but you got to be really careful, and it cannot be mandatory.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have 2 more?
Right.
Let's see if we can.
Um,
Okay.
Let me go ahead and call Matthew Mitchell first.
Okay. Let's see if we can do this in two more minutes because we have to give the opposition the same amount of time. Okay.
My name is Matthew Mitchell. I live at 12925 Morning Park Circle. I'm actually about to move to Providence Farms Lane. But I think that I've spent a little time reviewing the subdivision and I listened to the presentation. I think that in theory it's a great idea. I think that you could conceivably do something like this that could work. I actually worked with the people that created New Urbanism. I'm an architect, and so I'm very familiar with how that then became the conservation subdivision and all this. But ultimately, I think there's a tremendous number of questions that have to be answered and have to be addressed. And I think that if it's, generally speaking, I've got too many comments for tonight, but I think generally speaking, the biggest picture is that it does nothing for the overall density, other than create pockets like Crabapple. It takes an urban typology, puts it into a suburban or rural area, but it does it with only the residential component. That is not something that is going to work from an urban planning standpoint, simply because you're still generating every single trip out of there to go to every single destination anybody needs to go to. So if it's going to be something of this type, it would have to be a mixed-use thing that allows people to not have to, if I need a loaf of bread, I got to drive over to Kroger. I think for regulatory purposes, this is going to be a legal document, and it has to be bulletproof, because people are going to figure out exactly how they can work around it. They're going to work to the minimums. They're going to work to the maximums, and that's it. There's not going to be gray area. The whole thing is economically motivated. The profit that comes from selling the houses is what drives the cost of the land, and the taxes that the taxpayers are paying is what is forcing some of them to sell the larger parcels of land. There are several people that are selling off simply because they've had it for generations. They can't afford the taxes anymore. And there's this huge price tag on them now because someone can make a tremendous amount of profit by turning it into a subdivision. And I think that big picture, this document doesn't really provide sufficient criteria or guidance or restrictions. If you look at any new urbanist planning documents, they're pretty beefy, simply because they get very detailed, because there's a lot of research that goes into them on precedents. Ironically, most of those precedents are urban, whether it's Charleston or whether it's Savannah or Maryland. But I understand the need that we have to move quickly because, as she said, we're losing the land like crazy. We moved here in 2005 because we love it, because we love the feeling of it. We were firmly behind establishing the city of Milton because we wanted it to have local control. We're glad that it does. But I think that we have to be very careful as a community to make sure that this thing doesn't result in a lot of unintended consequences. I have several questions that are related to the ordinance specifically. And I'll just touch on a few of them. Part of the problem is that it's creating circular logic, because it says we're going to reduce the size of the lots. Because we reduce the size of the lots, now we have to have community septic. Well, that's circular logic. You've created the need for the problem. And I don't agree with that approach. There's a conflict in what was presented tonight to what's in the ordinance. The ordinance says in one of its purposes that it promotes neighborhood connectivity through sidewalks. He's saying there won't be sidewalks. Personally, I think in a rural area like Milton, a sidewalk is a bad thing because you will typically mow down all the street side trees to put the sidewalks in. Alpharetta has done it a lot. There's a whole lot of details. One of them, you're allowed to have a house within 50 feet of the green space. Well, 50 feet is the width of this room. So if I'm in that green space and I'm 50 feet from a house or vice versa, that's nothing. That's not, a rural character by any stretch of the imagination. And it's that type of thing that I think needs to be addressed. I think when you site houses first, you create spaghetti and meatballs, which was the cul-de-sacs. That's how we ended up with what we've got in these suburban messes now. Most urban planning happens through how you site the connectivity and how you site public spaces toward vistas or toward amenities, not how you site a house and then try to connect it with roads, unless you're in a historic area like Jerusalem. There's a lot of questions. How is average grade defined? 60 by 100 lot is tiny. 30-foot lot width, how do you do a 30-foot lot width unless it's a townhouse? You're essentially going to end up with a zero lot line if you've got a 5-foot setback. You've got 10 feet between houses. A 20-foot house is a shotgun house, essentially. 2,000 square feet is the limit. Well, 2,000 square feet, I agree with the last gentleman that spoke. That is not going to be something that's going to command high dollars. And someone will come in and say, hey, I've got a market here because it's unique, because there's a lot of people that want to live here that can't afford to live here. But if they can buy a 2,000 square foot house, then they can live here. There's a lot of things that need defining. Green space. I don't know that we should say an open pasture with a septic system under it is green space. I think we should differentiate between native and we should differentiate between green and passive and active. We can't say that tennis courts and basketball courts are going to qualify for green space, which this ordinance does. It says active is the same as leaving virgin land, which I don't agree. It says we have to deal with managing stormwater, but it's creating the need for having to manage the stormwater by mowing everything down that's less than 15 inches in caliper. A 15-inch caliper is big.
Sir, it's been, we've
I'm
got
sorry.
a full
Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay, will you do me a favor and email us all of that?
Absolutely.
All of that? Okay, thank
Sorry.
you. We got, what,
Okay,
one
and
more?
so we have one more. And
Like
so
a-
we're at 20
what-
minutes total on the one
We
side.
gotta do like 1 minute, because we gotta do 20 minutes on the other
Yeah.
side.
Okay, Bernard Wolf,
And then we
please.
gotta, is there two more or one more? Is there-
One more.
I think that was.
That's on this side that I have. I have additional ones that are,
The woman in the back was,
well, I think we have people who keep on bringing stuff up, so.
We're gonna have to cut it at 21 minutes, so. Alright.
Laura and I spoke for about 4 minutes.
Right.
So far, we're the only people who've spoken in favor of this.
Oh, I hear you.
So the other 16 minutes has all been in opposition.
Okay, thank you. All right, go Mr. Wolf.
I'll try to speak
Okay.
quickly about this. I did want to mention that I'm Bernard Wolf. I live on 1000 Lackey Road in Milton, of course. I've put together, I and several other landowners, a collection of property. Now it's about 238 acres. It could be 272 on it's along Ebenezer, Sweet Apple, and Arnold Mill Roads. I have hired, basically, this came together when a fellow I've known all my life, I found out he was an architect that's done conservation-type developments for years all over the country and internationally, historical concepts. We came up with a development plan that's based on conservation development that would basically provide synergy to individual farm lots that have been in our family for decades, or one of them since probably the 1850s. We wanted to leave behind a good legacy and yet also have something that was practical, would be good for the city, and would allow us to sell our properties for more than we would if we just sold it for the bulldozer to develop 1 acre, 1 house subdivisions. Again, this goes back about 2.5 years. The concept that we have for conservation development, I think with the amended proposal we have here is pretty close to defining it. The way we defined it in ours, our concept is, instead of having your world as 1 acre and with your house in it, in effect you have a complete community, if you will, in which your house has a footprint and your backyard, if you will, is the entirety of that. We have a really unusual site, and I would really like for you all to come see it. What we have on our property
It's been 2 minutes.
Yeah. What we have on our property is
Now, you're in favor, correct?
I'm in favor.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a quick little recess here. So we've had 16 minutes technically in opposition. And we've had, what, 6 minutes in favor? Is that?
I can do this very quickly.
Okay.
What we have is we have an area coming down the center, which is a creek, 2 ponds, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I'm curious to see what the rest of the commission wants to do as far as the time allotted.
I think you need to let Mr. Wolf
Wrap up.
Finish, and
Finish.
then.
But with respect to the time.
And how many do we have in opposition, or technically in opposition?
I have 2, 3, I have 3 so far.
Okay, all right.
I can make it real quick.
You got it, Mr. Wolf.
We have the central amenity is.
One moment, Bernard.
Okay. Do you have specific questions regarding this ordinance?
Yeah, I do
Right
have
here.
one
Okay.
comment that I'd
Yeah.
like. Basically, we have a segregated system of ridges pointing inward, overlooking a really beautiful area that's natural forest with a creek going through the bottom, trails going about 3 miles through this forest. The building areas will be on top of these ridges. They're vertically segregated from the rest, and what we'd leave in the natural area is this wet area. I think the recommendation I would have is relates to density. For this job to be done really, really well, I think it's a function of density to what can be done, and that relates to how much the landowners can get for their property and how much the developers will get. I suggest instead of having density set in stone, be flexible with that and look at each proposal that you get. It's going to be different from each one of these properties. Ours is really unique. You feel like you're in Highlands, but you're 10 minutes from Roswell. And it works very well with ours. We do have a situation where you could have pretty high density in these areas now, but yet leave the rest uncharted. It also is good for equestrian, everything in the middle. It's a real neat place. That's all I have to say. Otherwise, I'm in favor of everything you said, including I do like the sewer system on site. That is using Serenbe. We've looked into it. The company that has proposed it for us has been in business like 26 years in some very challenging areas. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
That was about 4 additional minutes.
Okay, are you kind of keeping track of the opposition and, because technically some of those people were opposition.
So the total of 4, it was total.
Got 8.
10 for.
10 minutes for. So then the remainder is 16 in opposition so far.
So we would like, we have a recommendation to do 15 minutes total so far. So we got, what, about 5 minutes left on?
Yeah, but we have 6 people to do it.
Okay, let's just see what we can do.
So I'm going to start over here.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
The first person is Scott Reese.
This is opposition.
Yes, this is for sure opposition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Scott Reese with Brumlow Reese and Associates, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia, 30004. I am in opposition to a mandatory for all site conservation subdivision guidelines or regulations. I am for the option for someone, if they so desire, to develop their property under the guidelines if the guidelines are passed. I see several problems with the mandatory conservation subdivision. The wastewater system is very short of being handled, especially on projects the size that we're going to have. We don't have 2,000 acre parcels left in the city of Milton. A subdivision the size of the manor originally started on a private package system. It is now managed and controlled by the County of Forsyth because of problems. So even a subdivision the size of the manor did not work on a privately held package system. My understanding is anything under 10,000 gallons a day is still the purview of the county, not the state. So we're looking at properties that have to be in excess of 20 acres to meet the requirements. State guideline is 150 gallons per day per bedroom. So 4 bedrooms, 600 gallons, do the math. So 20 acres and above is the only thing that would be allowable for the state under my understanding. If, there may be some way around it, but that's per the state guidelines. I guess I'm a little, we now have an AG zoned property with the requirements that 25% is the proposed impervious area. So 75% would be undeveloped or raw land. And now we're going to a 60-40, so I don't really know that we're generating anything there. It's the main thing. We have people that have owned property here for many, many years. We've got generational changes. My parents are in their 80s. We have the property that we own. We're going to have to sell. The IRS comes knocking. There are such things as inheritance laws. We're going to have to sell. And we need the ability to sell it to anyone if they can develop it under the existing guidelines, or if they want to under a proposed conservation. But it should not be a mandatory that the conservation subdivision, because there are many unforeseen consequences. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Carol Alfaro.
Good evening. My name's Carol Alfaro, and I live at 16285 Laconia Lane. I'm a professional geologist, a certified geologist nationally. I've worked for several engineering companies. I've worked with residential development. And the reason I'm opposed to this is I am at heart a conservationist, and I like the concept. But like some of these other people have alluded to, there's a lot of details that need to be vetted out. And like one of the gentlemen said, one of them is the definition of green space. That is extremely important. That's the crux of the whole concept. The other thing is on the density. I think that the density needs to be looked at closely in the setback requirements because you have to visualize what Milton would look like, in about 20 years if you have those types of developments. The other thing is echoing the other gentleman that just presented. I don't think it should be mandatory. I think it should be a choice. And if the due diligence is done, then I think that you'll have a better outcome. The other thing is, as far as due diligence, I think that there should be some requirements or something in the engineering plans or designs for extreme weather events. As we all know, we're getting 100-century rainfall events, stormwater. And so that's really needs to be accounted for with these types of developments. Actually, in 2006, when I moved to Milton, I worked with EPA, and I actually brought to the city of Milton EPA to talk about conservation subdivisions. So this was something a long time ago. The other thing I would caution is that to look for communities in Georgia, outside of Georgia, that are similar size as Milton, because there are a lot of case studies of communities that have put these in. Some of them have been very successful. Other ones might have had problems. So I think if there's some due diligence done with that, it'll help you all make a better decision. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Ian Ordway.
My family has owned land in North Fulton County since 1962.
Excuse me, sir. Can you state your name and
Oh,
address?
I'm sorry.
That's
My
it.
name is Ian Ordway. I live at 14741 Birmingham Highway.
Thank you.
anyway, let me start again. My family has owned land in North Fulton County since 1962. We own approximately 33 acres, and we paid tens of thousands of dollars in taxes all those years. Like Mr. Reese, we're facing selling our property because of inheritance, IRS problems. And I would like to know if the City of Milton develops this plan of a 60% loss of buildable property, how are they going to compensate my family for the loss? And also, I'd like to point out that what I've heard was a 10,000-gallon septic tank for a community system will invite the EPA in. So I just want to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Julie Zonner Bailey.
Hey, Julie. For the record, we do have your email. We're going to ask every question.
And just before the time starts, as a matter or a point of order, I'd just like to highlight that I think that since this is the first public opportunity that the citizens and lots of people with different perspectives have had to come, the very fact that we're having to parse the words, that letters that were written weren't read into the record, people that I've never met and seen before had comments, and yet they couldn't speak, they felt rushed. This, I think, is evidence of what a huge issue this is. And to think that we're looking at a clock and saying, oh my gosh, we've got a minute and a half to give all of our comments, I think that is a disservice to what is supposed to be a public process. And I say that as a generic comment with no disrespect, because I respect every single person that's on this board and serves as a community member. But as a function of public process, it causes me great concern to have anybody, whether you're for it or against it or somewhere in the middle, to not have adequate time to truly vet all the issues. There are a lot of issues. And I say that because I respect every person in this room, every single person that's not here, people that wrote letters. Those commentary, good, bad, or indifferent, have a right to be heard. And we are being shortchanged, and we're shortchanging the citizenry of this city of Milton that we were formed to hear when we limit people's commentary to 10 minutes on one side and 10 on another, when you have something that should have been before a committee for the last year. So it causes me to be passionate because I care about public process. I say that because that has nothing to do with the ordinance itself, but I think we need to take a good hard look when we have people worried about the clock ticking, and I say that with due respect. I hope that that's taken as it's intended. I'd like now to introduce myself. My name is Julie Zonner Bailey. I live at 255 Hickory Flat Road, Milton, Georgia 3004. I appreciate the opportunity to address concerns with the current draft of the conservation subdivision. While it's recognized that the intent of this ordinance originally may have been to help preserve the more rural areas of Milton, the negative consequences of the actual draft before you this evening does not preserve our rural community, but instead exposes us to higher density housing and a multitude of unintended consequences. Based on the number of issues with this current draft and everything that we've been hearing this evening, I request that this actual draft be removed from the current zoning cycle because this zoning cycle is very tight. This evening, we heard earlier an item having to do with Arnold Mill, and there were folks talking about having been in a committee for over a year. This is the first time that that's been vetted. We have only 5 weeks, and it's going to be back before you. So one strong recommendation is that we remove this issue from a zoning cycle and allow it to be vetted in a committee format, not one-off meetings, but with people that are intelligent, that understand and have passion on both sides of the issue. Let people come together in a facilitated environment with ample time. This is a huge issue. The issues need to be vetted in that broader community. And so with that in mind, I will highlight specific items. You mentioned, Mr. Jameson, I appreciate that you do have my document before you, and I would ask for careful consideration. But given that it's a public meeting, I will identify each of these individual notes. On page 1, under documents, purpose and intent, it is stated in the document, reducing the perception of density and maximizing the number of dwellings with direct access. It should cause us great pause that this intent is to reduce the perception of density. I thought the intent was to maintain low density. That's not what it says. That gives me heartburn before I even get to page 2. The public input process. This document doesn't talk about a public input process. It says that the document will have and have the opportunity to be reviewed with all due respect by the Office of the Community Development Director, but that's it. And that hardships can be approved singularly by either the Community Development Director or by the Public Works Director. That's concerning. This is a zoning issue. It impacts landowners. I'm a landowner. It impacts me. It impacts my neighbors. That's an issue. Density neutrality. The consultant talked about density neutrality. I couldn't agree more, but this document does not adequately address density neutrality, nor does it give specifics about the yield plan. Page 2, it's a critical issue. Are percolation tests actually required? How are they going to be confirmed scientifically? What's going to be the methodology within the city of Milton? This cannot be a generic, let's look at it and trust it. We got to trust it, but verify it scientifically. What is the yield currently, not based on light engineering, by actual engineering tests? Green space, we've heard it again and again, and I'm going to say it again. 60% of the green space sounds good, but that's not what the document says. The document says that 25% of that green space can actually be the sewer system. Well, a sewer system in Milton's not going to look like the pictures in Serenbe. As it was mentioned, I think, by Howard Carson, Serenbe was about 2,000 acres owned by 1 or 2 people. That's not the environment you have in Milton. What plays out in Serenbe will not be what plays out under this document in the city of Milton. We can't make those comparisons. Serenbe is beautiful. That's not going to happen here based on how this is constructed. Page 4, buffers. It talks about houses will be sited and not closer than 50 feet of the green space. There was a gentleman that spoke that said 50 feet is too close. Couldn't agree more. The consultant mentioned 100 feet on a peripheral buffer. That's not mentioned anywhere in this document. I know that I, as a landowner, I don't want a sewer system 50 feet from my buffer. There's nothing in here that says it's going to be 100 feet. That's a huge concern. There are no definitions about buffers. I love the point about it needs to be native buffer, passive buffers, active buffers. We need definitions. Wastewater treatment systems, huge issue. This would be the first opportunity, the first instance in which community septic would be introduced to the whole of Milton when this has been a community that said we don't want sewer. Community septic is effectively the same as sewer. It brings high density. That's the issue. It's the white elephant in the room. Let's address it. And so if in 5 weeks we're going to say that after the course of forever, we're now going to introduce community septic with no detail, that's an issue. I love the fact that Mr. Carson and others mentioned the fact that the manor and that community septic system has been a huge problem. We need to look at that. There are huge risks. Lot lines, just an example where it mentions that they should be of regular shape. What does that mean? I highlight that just as an example of the sorts of definitions that are lacking within this document. And I will say also, I'm a conservationist, I'm a preservationist. I've worked very hard and very long for decades to protect what is the city of Milton. And so I say that because unfortunately what's before us is not a protectionary sort of document in its current state, and that's what I have to address is what's the current state of the document before us. High-density lot sizes. This contemplates 6,000 square foot lots. That's 7.25 units to the acre. Nothing could be further from rural. In terms of the trails, it's just another example of something that's being talked about in terms of being put into the buffer. I love trails. I helped put the trail system in place, and I support it for everything within Milton. But we can't shove things into a buffer and then think that we still have a buffer. So if you have a natural buffer and suddenly you can have a swath of 20 feet that's now a trail, it's no longer a buffer. Just like if you put the sewer system in the buffer, you no longer have a buffer. Just like the sewer system is not green space. Green space should be defined as green space. So permitted uses for green space. Somebody else mentioned tennis courts, basketball fields. That's not green space. Stormwater management systems, retention and detention facilities. That's not green space. So 60% green space is not what the math would bear out under this document. Stormwater facilities, this says that a singular person in the city of Milton could allow those to be represented as a hardship. We heard another speaker earlier tonight say that if there's a hardship, we're forcing something that shouldn't be. You don't need a stormwater facility to be in the buffers or to be identified as part of the green space. Items that are not contemplated within this but need serious consideration. Distinguishment between non-buildable and buildable land. There's no such category. If you look at other examples of CSOs around the country, that's expressly defined and talked about. Minimum number of acres required for a CSO. We hear 20 acres based on the 10,000 square feet. One thing I would ask is, if you need to have a CSO as an option somewhere within our toolkit, maybe they don't need to be everywhere. Maybe they need to be in areas that are really higher density, or maybe they need to be part of that Arnold Mill corridor. If you have one or two site specifics that are going to be shared between Roswell and Milton, make that a site-specific application for CSO, but don't force the city of Milton to take that on in totality, but instead put them where you already have higher density, or perhaps use those where you have access to the sewer system. It shouldn't be a solution for the whole of Milton because it's not in fact rural as it's currently contemplated. In terms of a definition section, I agree, somebody else noted that. The magnitude of the issues within this current document are vast. It's requested, again, that this draft document be taken out of the current zoning cycle. Let's have deliberate, thoughtful dialogue with intelligent people on both sides of the equation. This is not something that should be rushed. This is something that deserves a lot of contemplation. And again, I say, I am all about preserving Milton. The current document before you, however, has many, many unintended consequences. I so appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody that's spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next
Who's next?
speaker, I'm sorry.
Yep, who's next?
Okay, the next speaker is David, I think it's Lees.
I'd like to say thank you for listening to all this tonight. I know it's probably a big headache for you as it is for me. I believe this should be a choice.
Can you
If
do your
somebody
name
wants
and
to
address,
do it.
sir?
Excuse me?
Your name and address.
David Lees, 2420 Bethany Bend.
Okay.
I think this should be a choice. If somebody wants to sell their land to a developer for this type of thing and lose the value of what the land is, then so be it. Serenbe was a choice. This wasn't something that was decided by a city council. This was a few people that got together and put this deal together. And we all know, we've already heard about all the failings of this. I'd also like to thank the first people that spoke here for being self-serving because they intend to profit from this. And the first gentleman that got up here and spoke very eloquently, he turns out he's on the Conservation Committee. So that's a little self-serving there. It always amazes me how people try to tell other people what to do with their land. And it irritates me beyond belief. If owners that are in favor of this being mandatory, then let them donate their land. But you can't tell me that a roughly $100,000 an acre and 40 acres, that's $4 million, and you're talking about building on 15 acres, that's $1.5 million. No developer's going to pay the other $2.5 for that. I can guarantee it. That's how I make my living. I'm in the real estate business. I own a farm down the road here, and I bought that, and it's my choice to keep it a horse farm. But I want it to be my choice, not you people up here. When I sell this land, when the time comes and it's time for me to sell, then whatever they want to do with it, they do with it. They want to keep it a horse farm. If it's sold to a developer, great. But I don't think it will be because of the size of the house. But if you want green space, you people in here that can't afford to live in Milton, then get your big checkbook out and write the check, or go get a big mortgage and carry it. This just irritates me beyond belief. The land values will definitely drop here. I did not buy in the city of Milton to lose value. I bought here because I saw that there were $1 million houses and above here. I knew this was a good place for my family to be, and I intend for it to stay that way. I think this is ridiculous that we're even having this conversation up here. I've lived in the Crabapple area for 30 years and just recently moved to Atlanta. Had I known this, I may not have bought here. I pay $2,000 a year in taxes on my property. And it's beautiful that people can drive by and see the green space that I pay for, and then I get the privilege of picking Coke bottles up and beer bottles up on my yard daily. And, you know, if you don't agree with what I'm saying, that's fine. That's what America's about. But read the Fifth Amendment there on personal property rights. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Tina DeVersa.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tina D'Aversa. I live at 555 Champions Hills Drive, Milton, 30004. I live on that 1 acre lot on the golf course. That is what I thought we were in part hoping to protect when we became the city of Milton. I worked tirelessly for years prior to us becoming the city of Milton. I consider myself a conservationist and a protector of property of all that we have described. I've sat here tonight listening to all the comments, and of all that we've described conservation subdivision to be. And I worked on the Atlanta Regional Commission when they developed their definition of a conservation subdivision, and I forwarded some links and some comments to Mr. Moore earlier when I had the opportunity to read the ordinance while I was on spring break. And I do very much support conservation subdivisions, but not in the city of Milton. And let me tell you why. In the city of Milton, we're already protected. We became a city to protect ourselves. Okay? We protected ourselves saying that we wanted to remain rurally eccentric. And what that meant was that we were going to be rural if I wanted to live on a 1 acre lot in a subdivision where at any given time, I don't know that anyone lives around me. And it's not the same as being in by definition, a conservation subdivision, because someone had compared conservation subdivisions, I think it was the original speaker, presenting conservation subdivisions as people that wanted to live on a big lot with green space, so they moved to a golf course. Well, that's not the same thing, because at any given time, I can look out and the golfers are playing golf. That's not the same as looking out in 20 feet from me, there being another home, which in a lot of ways, you'll see that in a conservation subdivision. My thought and what I'd like for you guys to consider doing is going and looking at some of these other conservation subdivisions and thinking about the definition of why we wanted to remain rural Milton. Conservation subdivisions are meant for more urban areas. So possibly we could have an option for the Highway 9 corridor, and I wish we had done this a long time ago. We tried to have a design review committee and to develop Highway 9 more rurally than it's turned out to be, but not in the interior of Milton. If you look at where conservation subdivisions have been successful, they've been successful where it was going to end up being a more urban environment. So what did we need to do? We needed to protect that urban environment. So we protected it by making it mandatory that there be green space and that things be conserved. In the city of Milton, we're already conserving. By the fact that we have a tremendous amount of our land has remained rural, has remained equestrian, has remained farming community, has remained the 1 acre minimums, we're already protecting Milton. So why we would ever even intimate to make mandatory a conservation subdivision is something that really challenges me. I'd love to see if we do need to go down the path of having an ordinance, that we would take it on a case-by-case. We'd have an ordinance, but it would make it a case-by-case basis. So when somebody comes forward to you and they need to develop a large enough property, not 20 acres, I've heard all kinds of acreage thrown out here tonight, but a large enough property be developed into a conservation subdivision, that the Planning Commission and the staff work together to look at, okay, does this meet the requirements? Is this what the intent of a conservation subdivision was meant to be? Because if you make it mandatory and you make it this cookie cutter approach, then you've destroyed what we're trying to protect in Milton all along. And I also heard a comment that I just wanted to kind of mention. The reason why we became Milton and we boasted these 1 acre minimums is because truly it has protected us. And I really caution that we would ever consider doing something that would break that. We really have protected ourselves, both on the density side as well as the rural, keeping ourselves rural. Again, I challenge you as commission members, and some of you I know very well, and I know that you have some tremendous heart in conserving and protecting this community. I want to challenge you to remember the original intent of the city of Milton, and that I know that you will do your due diligence, and I would be happy, as some of the other speakers have mentioned, to participate in any sort of public committee review. I think 5 weeks is a ridiculous amount of time to think that this could get accomplished, but would be happy to participate in that. Thank you all for all that you do. It's a tough job, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, that was the last speaker card that I have.
Okay. So at this point, we're going to tend to answer all your questions as best as we can. think what we decided was we were going to go section by section, talk to the consultant, and hopefully he can guide us in the right direction. So that will close public comment. And Robin, do you have anything to say before we kind of go through this? No? Okay. We'll just start under purpose 50-137. I think Julie made a good point on section B. I mean, I think it's kind of a misword on maximize. Unless someone thinks otherwise.
Section
B.
Oh, you know,
We're kind of in
back
the.
and work on the original.
Oh, okay. What are you on?
I just have a different
Oh,
version
okay.
of it.
Okay.
This is the more recent.
Yeah.
Commissioner Moore, can you get your speaker, it's pretty far away from you, just make sure.
I like it that way.
You do?
Yeah, just make sure everybody can hear. I know the audience wants to hear you, everybody.
Not so sure about that. Before we even dive into the document, I just have a question for staff. We've heard referenced a couple times tonight the difference between the 8-page document that's before us, presented by staff, and the 18-page document presented by the consultant that worked on this on behalf of the city. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to pare down the 18 pages to the 8?
The 18-page draft that we received was exactly that, a very rough draft. And the staff did review it. We formed a review committee of 5 staff members that included 2 directors as well. And we did go through it. And we basically used the genesis, the intent of that 18 pages, but there was some redundancy in that. So with the concurrence of the consultant, we did clean that up. We did eradicate the redundancy. We also reorganized it so that it became more user-friendly. We felt that if we were going to have developers use this, we needed to have something that was customer service oriented. So with that in mind, we did reorganize it and essentially capture all the requirements as best we could. And we're not perfect, fine, but we did spend close to 100 hours of staff time taking that 15-page document and reorganizing it, making it very user-friendly, but maintaining the original intent. And that's what we came up with, and that's how we did it.
So with what you've heard this evening, both sort of meandering our way through the pros and cons this evening, are there some things that you think that were vetted that came out that may have some value to go back in to some
Sure,
of these?
yeah, and I've been taking some notes, and I think there were some things that, some things I think when we went from draft 4 to draft 8, in between, it might have got cut out. So I think there were some good points that we need to go back in and recapture those.
And so, Kathy, before we dive into page by page, are there some, because you've had a chance maybe to spend some more time with it, and with the benefit of the consultant, are there some things that you think that are some of those larger, big items that need to go back in that you could address tonight?
I'm not really prepared to address them this evening, Paul.
Okay. I mean, just
but I certainly will.
In terms of general topics, or without going into the detail, or some?
I'm trying to look for my original.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't seen it.
What? Based on this council, we just need another work session and not go.
We're going to do it in work session.
But I mean, why go through all this? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I left the comments that we received today on my desk, so I don't have them exactly.
That's okay, Kathy.
But yeah, I mean, there's always room for improvement. Thank you. But I also want to mention something that we added to the original draft that came through the consultant, and we spent a lot of time on this. And this was, we created a yield plan, because at the last time we came forward with a draft conservation subdivision ordinance, we heard the community very clearly say that they wanted a baseline to determine with an AG1 zoning use what would be the yield plan, and that would become the baseline for any conservation subdivision density. And so we wrote that section and inserted that section in there And if it's not as clear as it should be, then, you know, we need to go back and tweak it some more. But the idea was that we would receive from a developer who does that now a plan that shows how many lots with, based on a Soils 3 test, which shows what lots park,
Right.
gives
But
us
that's not
the yield.
written into the current eight
Well, it
pages,
is in
right?
there. It is in there, and maybe it's not as clear as it should be, but it is
Okay,
certainly in there.
that's moving that
Yes,
way.
and so that's what we meant, and if it's not as clear as it should be, then we need to rewrite it. But there is a yield plan in here that says that, so I think that, so that was in addition to what the original draft was, and something that, to the consultant's benefit, he didn't really know that was an issue the last time around. So we added it and we brought him up to date. So that's why we ended up doing it at our end. So that was clearly one of the issues. The other issue is, of course, your buildable lot, and green space comes off the buildable lots, and there are different ways you can mix and match this, but we felt it was the cleaner way again of figuring out what type of green space we were looking at. And we defined a buildable lot as one that would have a house lot. It would exclude all roads, and would also exclude stormwater facilities, which usually go into a separate lot, which is not a buildable lot. So you take all the buildable lots, and from that, then you, whatever that acreage is of buildable lots times 60, which was the example that our consultant used.
Right.
And, you know, there are other ways of slicing and dicing this. And you can have 30% of just straight green space, excluding the area for the community septic. So, you know, you can slice and dice that any way you want. We thought 60% is probably the highest we've seen of any community in the state. So it was a very, very aggressive amount of green space. And a lot of the ordinances we have looked at use the general green space that includes everything with limits. Like, for instance, the active recreation area, we set up to 10%. So you know, we allowed certain things with certain limitations, but we use that general green space determination. Now, you can start excluding things. When you start excluding things out, then you've got to lower the percentage of green space. So you can really do it either way. But I think the important thing is that we use as our base the amount of buildable lots as the means from which we derive the 60% open space. So that's another little issue. Let's see, what else? The whole issue of the wastewater treatment systems and the septic, yes, it is underneath. You know, it is a pasture, but I would maintain that every one of you has a pasture in your house, in your house lot, and that you have your own septic system. So you are pretty close to your own septic system right now, and the fact that you're going to be close to a community septic, it's underground. It's the same idea. It's just a little larger. And that's really what we're comparing here. So,
Well, okay, all right, I'll come back and address that later.
And and then of course the high density, it's the same amount of lots from the AG1 zoning to the conservation subdivision. We did say that you could have certain different size lots. We tried to mix and match, and maybe we could spend some more time revising that. I mean, we said we proposed 6,000 square feet would be the minimum size lot, of which no more than 50% could be at that size. So if we're using that, we've got 35 lots that you can build on, you know, only 50% of those could be at that size. The rest would have to be at other sizes. The important thing to remember here is that when we did the numbers, we came out, if you're using a 60% open space, no matter how large or small the subdivision is, you end up with an approximate size of an average size lot of 0.4 acres. That's the average size. So how you slice and dice the size of the lots, making sure that you're not lower than 6,000 square feet, is really how you lay it out on the land, and that I think is a case-by-case basis.
And I think too, just to reiterate the yield plan, we start with the yield plan. So if a 50-acre site can only yield with a traditional AG1 septic system, 1-acre lots, let's say you can only yield 40 lots out of it, that's all you get. You only get 40 lots out of the 58, whatever. I mean, it's not multiplied by how many 6,000 square foot lots you can put in.
Right,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very confusing concept for the novice in this, and the math is very important to having people comprehend
And,
it.
you know, and maybe, and my takeaway certainly tonight is that maybe we're not as clear as we could be, and we need to clarify
That's,
a lot of this.
that's what I'm kind of going at with the commission, as far as y'all feel comfortable with what's in front of us, the 8 pages, to actually start going through it and giving staff guidance.
I don't yet. I like where Kathy's going in
Right.
terms of the broad brushstroke things
Yeah.
first, and that's why I've asked to go there. And
Right. Oh, yeah, that
with
makes-
the
yeah, that
chairman's
makes sense.
permission to
Yeah.
do that, because I think before we dive into the detail and fight our way through
It's a lot.
the detail of this, I think it's really important to think about some of the larger conceptual things that have to be addressed first.
Mhm.
Because if you haven't got a comprehension of what the larger conceptual things look like, we're going to get lost in the detail, and it'll take us 6 years to get through this.
Oh, yeah.
To produce whatever the end result is, a usable document or a vote against it. That's the two choices at the end of the day: produce a usable document or vote against it. So I think if you'll indulge
Oh, yeah.
a little
No,
bit further,
that's
I think
exactly
that
it.
Kathy's
Yeah.
going absolutely down the right direction in terms of where I need to understand first some of the things that
Yeah.
are the broader brushstroke things.
And there's one more here that I'd like to address, if I may, and that is this issue of whether or not conservation subdivisions should go before a city council, or in some communities, they go before the planning commission for their review and approval. And that was another issue that we spent a lot of time talking about. And I really could argue it on both sides, so let me sort of give you both sides of this. If this becomes mandatory, for instance, and you decide that there should be some review process, there could be an awful lot of meetings spent on this, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but either the city council or the planning commission will have to devote a good amount of meetings toward that. I've worked in a community where it did have to go to the city council, and it was an optional tool in the toolbox, as we say, and it was not used very much at all because it was treated like a rezoning, and it just took a lot of time for a developer to do, and time is money for a developer. The other issue is that you saw we had a preliminary review tonight of another one of our form-based codes, and with all of our form-based codes, what we've established is that we've established what the zoning is, and you all, from a policy perspective, have given your input, and it's been approved by the city council. And then once that was put in place, it's left to the community development department and public works to implement. So that was the model we decided that we should use, is that you all would establish the policy for this conservation subdivision, but the nitty-gritty, day-to-day review of it, working out through a very iterative process, which is what's built in here. You'll notice we try to make it extremely iterative, and where we didn't say everything, because as Robin keeps saying, it's a zoning ordinance. It's not a
zoning ordinance. It's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance. It's a regulatory ordinance, so you can't write in intent and procedures. You really have to keep it regulatory, but all that is very inherent in the process that we try to enumerate. But we felt that because it's so iterative, that it would be best left to the staff to implement, again, the policy set out through the intent of the ordinance. And so that's how we structured it. But it doesn't mean to say that it couldn't follow another model, and certainly there are other models for other cities where it does go through a city council review. So that's the two sides of it.
Yeah, I think that's critical. If I've heard one message loud and clear from the community this evening and in some of the emails that I've received, that is the importance of making sure that anything like this receives the light of day, so the community has an opportunity to have some input into it. I think that there's some good rationale behind that. I think transparency is something that, you know, government fights all the time, both positively and negatively in the news, and I would rather err on the side of greater transparency than less. So I think maybe we need to think a little long and hard about that part of it. And I do think this is actually different than form-based code. Form-based code is very tight, and I think because there are so many anomalies to the properties that are left for the consideration of the city of Milton, that you really can't think of them in the same vein. They really have to be treated differently. So I think that there's some merit to going back and reviewing that for the benefit of the community, give it the light of day, and probably remove some of the, the heartburn.
I think at the beginning, it definitely has to see the light of day. I mean, this is brand new. This is, and I also, on the mandatory side, I don't see how this could be mandatory at its present state.
Yeah, certainly not in its present state. And if you don't mind, just a couple more sort of top-line questions. One of the biggest debates is about the 6,000 square foot lot sizes. And we heard some reference this evening to larger lot sizes. Was there an example in particular that we chose that drove that part of the model for us? And if that was the case, are there other examples that we could look at that are 10 or 12 or 14,000 square foot lot sizes? I know that it changes the math, obviously.
Sure, and it could be any number. We try to give as much flexibility as possible by making it as low so that you could go, you could do some low, and then you could go all the way up to an acre very easily. Mm-hmm. Because don't forget, the average size with the 60% green space requirement, the average size of the lots become 0.4 acres. Right. So how you mix and match that. So we went to some very low to allow some very large, but you can bring them more in the middle. That's certainly acceptable. But again, just keep in mind that if you start to look at individual parcels and with the constraints on it, to us, we wanted the maximum amount of flexibility, and that's why we did that. Now, maybe the 50%, up to 50% can be, maybe that number should be changed.
Yeah, you've got, I recognize it's dynamic. I mean, when you're affecting one, you're affecting another.
But just keep that in mind that, flexibility is good, especially if you're dealing with individual parcels that have their own particular issues to them.
Okay. May I keep going?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like this kind of general.
Well, this is the first time this evening that I've heard any reference to the fact that the Manor package solution had moved to under the maintenance by Forsyth County. Can you guys confirm that?
I don't think it's the Manor. They were speaking to, because it was Howard Carson's developments, and he doesn't run the Manor. I think that was a misunderstanding. Yeah. That's under the guise of Forsyth County. They run.
Right. I know that that package plant resides. The physical structure of it is in Forsyth County.
And they pay when we get building permits in the Manor. Each builder has to pay to Forsyth County, so it is not independently run. So I think what Mr. Carson was speaking to was not the Manor, but some other developments in Forsyth.
Because the reference that I heard was that it was the Manor and that it had failed, and that it was now being run by Forsyth. So those, those are pretty powerful statements, and we need to make sure that
I believe that there were some that did fail, but it was not the Manor system. That was always been with Forsyth County sewer department. Yep. They've always run that large package plant.
Okay. Where else was I going to go?
You're on
Oh, I know. In thinking about that, when you guys were contemplating the language for the wastewater management that is either inside a traditional septic system versus some of the other things that are being contemplated for this, I noticed that the wording has changed from either wastewater management to community water treatment. And in some of the things that you guys have contemplated, is there actually treatment proposals in the mix? I know that we have. We're not driving a particular solution
on the size, and the size would require that. Now, some of we've had a briefing. There, gentleman is in the audience that actually briefed us, who has operated some of these, is that my understanding is, again, depending on size, that it could be as simple as that a house would have a small tank in the backyard, and from that tank there would be a pipe that would pump out into, it could go straight into a field. In other cases, when it's larger, it would go into a interim treatment area, like that little barn that we saw in Serenbe, where
Right.
it goes into there and then goes into the field.
But we're not mandating, well,
Yeah,
we're not doing anything yet, but.
Right, and that's a very important, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, in the contemplation of these, we're not suggesting one particular solution over another.
Absolutely
We're suggesting, though, that community septic is a solution with whatever level of either manufactured process or, I'm making up words to define what my interpretation of it versus traditional. So there's scalability to it. And depending upon the scalability or the available scalability, where we know that there are commercial solutions that are out there today, none of which have been used in, I guess, in the case of the Publix, I guess that's been used for the first time in the city of Milton.
But that's the package plan.
Yeah.
But the operative word here is upon approval of EPD, because that's where it all goes. EPD is the determining factor here.
Once you get north of 10,000 gallons. Correct.
Our understanding is that they would do anything, and let me just back up, because you just brought up something, is that we wrote this ordinance to cover anything over a minor subdivision. And a minor subdivision is anything, is it less than
5
acres? It's
Have we
three
done,
lots.
that was where I was going to go at some
So-
point, is have we defined a major
Yeah,
and
3
minor
lots or less
subdivision?
is a minor subdivision. So this starts at 4 lots. It could be as small as 4 lots, which is, it could be 2,000 gallons per day. So from the 2 to 10 is the small version, but from our understanding is that EPD would also take over from the county when it's not an individual septic, when it's a community septic, that also will go to EPD. So EPD, although it's a little less clear in the rules, the rules really get very clear when you get to 10,000 gallons per day. That is EPD.
Right.
The less clear is from 2 to 10. So we actually put in here, you'll see that if you're in the 2 to 10,000 gallon range per day, or 2 to 999, if you feel that economically you can't make this work, you could have the ability to come for a use permit to the city council to ask to just go to the normal AG1. And that's how we structured it, because we started everything after, from 4 lots on.
Kathy, can you point to me where in our pages that we have those size descriptions? I don't remember.
About to say, I don't think.
I don't remember that.
Page,
Yes, it's,
page 1 speaks to the.
yeah, yeah.
Two,
On page
bottom
1.
of page 1.
At the bottom. See, so but when
Right,
we.
but that doesn't address the.
2 to 10,
the 2 to 10.
2 to 10.
2 to 10,
And the
did
10
we
plus.
include that in the, well, we do have some language.
So that needs to
would
be
say
added.
that
Yeah.
it could be a use permit if it's 2 to 10, which would allow the council to, allow them to do the, oh, okay. All right, we have some language that we actually haven't passed on yet, but that's in our thinking, so that's why you
It's in
haven't
our
said.
head.
So
That's how we
mental
try to.
telepathy just didn't work today for us.
Yeah, that's how we try to come up with it, because the issue is, where do you start this? You know, and so the cleanest way is to put everyone into it, from 4 parcels on, 4 lots on. Or do you want to just start it at 10,000 gallons? So that's a policy issue that we did not address. We tried to sort of include everything.
How many homes is a 10,000 gallon again?
It's about a 20
20
acre subdivision.
acre.
It's about 17,
Okay.
16, 17 homes.
Okay.
Depending on how many bedrooms, that's sort of where you end up. So if you want to include everything, you get into an area where you're talking about smaller subdivisions, and again, when you're in a community septic,
Would this
it's not
work
something
the
that's
way
really
it's written
workable.
and under?
So we felt in conscience that we needed to develop an escape clause, and so we've actually we're drafting it up, and we haven't passed it on yet, but that's where our thinking is going as well. So there are lots of different areas here that,
Okay, and Kathy, we talked about, and it's sort of building on that. You and Robin just a minute ago, I sat through the meeting the other night when the consultant presented some of this to the community, and I'm not remembering, there was a second discussion about it where there was a pretty significant debate about whether or not we should include minor subdivisions. Oh, I know what it was. It was the other night in the moratorium discussion. That's where the conversation took place, is whether or not we should include minor subdivisions and what does that look like, and do we have, I don't recall a definition that is major versus minor subdivision.
There's a definition of a minor subdivision, and then there's a, it's within the, for sure, it's in the subdivision regulations. And then there's a regular final plat or regular subdivision.
And is the minor subdivision address number of lots, or is it address acreage?
Yes, let me look it up for you, and I'll give you the definition.
Okay. I think that's going to be important because, one of the things that the community's asked us to think about is what's the right size? Is it mandatory from 0 up, one, or meaning one lot up, or is this mandatory from, a larger contemplation? When we talk about the fact that I think somebody said tonight that there were only, I wrote it somewhere, 30.
Talking about the available lots,
Yeah.
the number of lots
Yeah,
available,
did you write
20
that
acres,
down?
yeah, 20 acres or more, 3,200 acres. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So what's, is there something that we should consider where you don't introduce a conservation subdivision into something where you are going to end up with a bunch of silly little pods around town if it's a smaller acreage and they really are out of place in what may have otherwise been a more rural pastoral area versus something where you contemplate a threshold being somewhere in the range of 20 acres where you truly can then get this kind of separation and more sizable green space where it does begin to make more sense. I don't have an opinion about that yet because I'm looking forward to more information being available to me before I can formulate that opinion. But I think that has to do, we need to have some more dialogue about that for sure. What does it
And
look
we've struggled with that too, in terms of where to exactly start that. And we tried to include everything, and then we felt that, it may become too onerous.
Yeah.
So I think that's further discussion, sir.
Hey, I based on the community input tonight on both sides, I think we need to get this 8-page document a little bit more,
beefed up.
Yeah. Beefed up a little bit.
I can't answer your question now on the definitions.
Okay.
So, first of all, a minor plat, it means a finished drawing of a subdivision of no more than 3 lots that at the time of subdivision does not necessarily but may involve a land disturbance permit, new streets, extension of a utility or other municipal facility, and depicts all legal and engineering information required by this chapter. And then a final plat means a finished drawing of a subdivision that provides a complete and accurate depiction of all legal and engineering information required by this chapter. Certification for recording, ratification of the manager's approval by the mayor and city council is required. So being that a minor plat is 3
Right,
or
3
less,
lots.
and then
3
everything
lots,
else is
though, right?
It says, minor plat means a finished drawing of subdivision of no more than 3 lots that at the time of subdivision.
So is in contemplation of the definition of lot, then, is it one?
Is
1 acre,
typically-
1 lot,
well,
or
it
could
doesn't
it
have to
be
1
3
acre.
5-acre lots?
No, it's a lot. It could be for an R3 subdivision. It doesn't dictate the acreage, but it's
Right.
just, it's 3 lots, whether it's a 1/4 acre lot or a 5-acre lot, it doesn't matter. Now, what happens is that when you tip to 4 lots of buildable lots, of house lots, then it kicks in detention and some other engineering issues.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's the gist of some of the larger things I wanted to address. So I've exhausted some of the things I wanted to do before we dive into anything else.
I mean, I can dive into the weeds all night long on a lot of this stuff. And I think there's a lot of issues from the community that kind of hasn't been addressed. And I think that's Noel. I mean,
I've got a couple comments. First of all, I think everything that Paul was going for there, looking for more clarity, is crucially important. First thing I want to say is I want to thank all of the people that came in today to give us public comment. This is a big contentious issue, and there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of facets of this issue. And a lot of people's lives are going to be affected by it for the long term. So that's one of the reasons why I think we should not get into the weeds with debating these small little issues. I don't feel we're ready. We're not ready. The document's not ready, and this entire concept is not developed far enough to start talking about how much setback or how little coverage. We're not at that point, and we can waste a lot of time tonight even talking about those things, but when we get to more development, those issues, may not even be included in there. So for me personally, I wouldn't want to waste that time. However, we have asked for, one of the things that we've asked for was to have some type of stakeholder meetings to discuss this. Can you tell us how that's going, or if that's going, or if something along those lines will happen?
We're happy to accommodate whatever type of schedule you'd like to set.
I think,
for direction.
like, when we did the form-based code, we had stakeholder groups and on both sides in the same room discussing all of this, and it took almost a year, if I'm correct in that. Now, I know we've been talking about this for close to a year, but it's been more of a general guideline without everyone in the same room debating all this stuff. So I hate to say go back to the drawing board, but I think we have at least a general idea of what you've given us, but I think we have to get everyone in the same room discussing these topics in a mediated fashion probably isn't the correct term, but something along those lines like we did in Arnold Mill Road. That's just kind of my thoughts on it, and I don't know what the time frame should be or can't be. It's more, I'm willing to put in all of the work. I'm willing to meet as many times as possible in order to get this done. I know there's a moratorium that's going to end, end of June?
In July.
It's 90 days.
Yeah.
It's a 90-day moratorium.
Okay, but the point is not to be working toward some arbitrary deadline that we've set for ourselves so that we meet a deadline and then sell out our future. I mean, that to me, I can't swallow it. I just cannot swallow that.
That's kind of where I'm going.
If I'm not saying we need to extend the moratorium, but what we need to do is we need to debate what might be the larger issue. For instance, we need to understand where this is viable, and that's something that can be done I believe, in relatively quick manner. Where is the cutoff? Where is the break even economically and viability wise on the size of these things? If it's 20, 30, 40, 50, it doesn't affect me personally, but we need to make the decision of what we're going to consider for this. If we're not going to consider these small things, let's release them off the moratorium. If it's 20 acres and below, let's get that done. But we don't need to tie up the whole universe while we're considering one issue that might impact the other half of the universe. Does that make sense?
I agree, absolutely.
Okay.
I agree.
Secondly, working toward that direction, another thing I've asked for is to do a comparative study of two developments. Are we doing that?
Yep.
And how are we going to do that? What's the schedule? Who's doing that?
Robin,
Yes, we have our staff working on that now, and we're starting with one development in terms of what the cost is doing it with the regular AG1 subdivision way, and then the other doing it as a conservation subdivision. In terms of the community sewer, that would have to be included, but of course you probably might have shorter roads. So we're doing the comparison, and so we're able to do that in-house well, with the help of a consultant for the cost, but the city architect is going to lay out a design. We'll take one of our existing subdivisions that we know the yield plan for, and we'll do a conservation subdivision design of it, and then have a cost analysis done to see what the cost would be for one versus the other. I think that's what you mean. Is that
Yes, ma'am. So when you say we are doing that, who is we is doing that?
the city architect and myself?
Okay, and is the city involving some of those from the community to help them do that? And what manner are we doing this one-line drawing of a new conservation subdivision?
Well,
By what guidelines would we use? Because we can't use this 8-page document or the 16 or the 9. So that's my concern is, are we doing it by the book, and then which book?
well, the book we have in front of us is the proposed 8-page subdivision ordinance that we have. Now, if you'd like us to look and find another one, we're happy to do that. But right now, this is the one that we feel very comfortable with, that gives us the amount of information that would be necessary for us to determine a viable conservation subdivision design. There are other models. The Atlanta Regional Commission has a model ordinance that we actually brought forward the last time that we brought forward an ordinance. So I guess I'm looking for direction. Which ordinance would you like us to use? Because we'll have to use one of them to come up with a configuration and then cost it out, which I think is what the exercise is.
As a suggestion, what I would like to see you do is engage some of these people who have some strong feeling about that, and let them direct you on what guidelines to utilize. For instance, part of my suggestion in making that comparison was to engage Scott Reese and Laura Rencher, some people who've got some vested interest in this issue, get them to work with you so that when we finish this comparison, we don't go to arguing, well, you didn't include this and you didn't include that.
I think
at least we've got some consensus direction as to what we are looking at when we get there. And I don't know what that's going to reveal. I have no idea. But when we get there, we need to have some ownership of it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I don't think at this point I can vote on this either way. I mean, it's just too many questions now have come up. I mean, prior to the meeting, I probably had a feeling I would vote on it, but after listening to the public, my answer is no, I can't vote either way at this point.
I think we do need to have some open stakeholder meetings that were.
I totally agree.
Yeah, because, I can tell the divide is in the community, and there's a lot of misinformation that's really, it's a little bit of education that we need to do, but everyone needs to be in the same room working towards the same goal. Yeah. And we've done that with everything else, and I think that's kind of where we need to go.
I think what's happened, Kathy, is without the benefit of those stakeholder meetings, we're being asked to legislate to that solution at this table.
Exactly.
Rather than letting those things shake out in those stakeholder meetings that would produce either a negotiated end result or
a consensus
sense
result,
of commonality.
So that we can all support the mission together, not these people are against it and these people are for it. It's got to be something that we're working together. Otherwise,
and
you're going to fail.
To the point there, it's on everybody's mind is that we are really troubled by the fact that we've got this moratorium cloud over us.
I mean, if I was a landowner, I would have some issues with the moratorium getting extended, and nothing getting done. If I was a landowner that wanted to get my land developed, I think they have, I think that's a major concern, and we don't need to rush this. And I think the moratorium is over zoning categories that probably don't need to have a moratorium on. That's just my 2 cents.
To be honest, the moratorium's affecting 95% of AG1. So.
Right. Well, I guess like the T2 and crabapple. I think there's some areas, and for example, I think council can talk about 20 acres or less. I mean, that might be something that is a viable option, because I don't know if a conservation subdivision in any way, shape, or form can even be viable under that limit. So that's just an option for council and not us, but that's just throw that out there.
I think the one thing I would like to know, that I've heard both sides, and if it's possible to get the information, can we get a real estate analysis of land that was sold for AG1 versus conservation subdivision to see if it truly does affect the selling price? Because I think that seems to be one of the biggest issues that we're not addressing. Does that affect the selling price?
Is there anything in
of the land? 'Cause that's what
area?
people are concerned about. Am I going to get this? I'm not going to get the same price. Can we find that out?
There really isn't a comp in the areas. I mean, there's really
Maybe it's not in the area, but
There's not like you've asked for.
But you know what I'm saying?
If you go on the Serenbe website and you look at what the pricing on the Serenbe website is for two bedroom, 2 bath.
Well, that's another issue. Would they sell it for to the developer, and does it appreciate as much or more as an AG1 house?
If it's an option, though, then
or is it the same? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it's the
The last thing I want
same.
to do is drive a decision as significant as this off of one example, which is.
Well, no, I don't want one example. I don't know if there's many
No,
examples.
my point is, I'm only offering one example, and there need to be a whole lot
That's
more.
before we proceed anywhere. Is this going to hurt people trying to sell their homes or the land? I'm sorry.
If it's an
You know?
option, no. If it's an option, no. Then the market will demand that.
But if it's mandatory,
if it's mandatory,
will it? We don't know. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I would.
But
I
I'd
would
like
think
to
it would.
get the proof that says it does or it doesn't. And do the houses go up more, or do the houses don't go up? More than AG1.
I think if it's
That's-
optional, then
I have a question.
market.
But at that point, Mark, to your point, the landowner today doesn't own it at the point of the home sale. They own it at the point of the land sale.
Well,
Not
no,
at
because
the point of the finished
but
product.
there was the two separate. Does it
Oh,
improve
the
Milton?
surrounding area.
Is it an appreciation? And does it affect the sale initially? And then 10 years from now, an AG1 versus a conservation, what's the difference in appreciation of those two subdivisions? That's.
Can I ask? Can I ask a question of somebody in the public at this point? I know we've closed public comment.
Technically closed public comment, but you can go ahead.
Okay, this is not for public comment.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Jack, I know that there is some research that's already been done on some land value analysis as far as the conservation subdivisions. I know I don't have that with me, but I know there's been some things, and at some point something was sent to me about that. I don't know who did the study. I know it wasn't done by ARNT, but it was some people doing research on land values. Do you know about that, and is that a file you have? Because
Well, that's still in the works. That what you saw was an early piece of information from that study. There's been information about that in all of Randall Arndt's books. All 6 of his books have got data about values of land, and that's what I was trying to see when I said how much more valuable these were than standard subdivision lots. But we can try to get that completed in short order, next week or so. We get that to you.
if it's current and relevant, then that would really help everybody on both sides of the issue understand the issue. The more we can understand it, the more we can make an agreement on it. And if we can't, the risk is too big, and you just can't decide.
I'm going to punish people.
It's just not there.
Hey, I have a question for Matt in the audience with the septic system stuff. When we're talking about less than 20 acres or not, in your experience, has that been a viable option?
That's my thing. The smaller the development, the more per lot the community wastewater system will be. So I would love to see it be optional based on the economics of the wastewater system.
Okay.
So, yes, smaller developments will be costlier per lot than a larger development. It's just economy of scale.
So community septic would work. So if you let's just say we got 20 perfect acres, and you can build 20 homes on what's 60 on 8 acres, right? That'd be 40%. Let's say you can build 20 homes on 8 acres. Would a community septic system work in that scenario? I mean, just in general.
Comes to economics.
Okay.
And there's so many variables on that, what kind of treatment you're going to have, what kind of soil you have. If you do individual septic, the price of an individual septic can range depending on your soil types, and if you have to have pumps and aerobic treatment, all these other factors. And that's something I outlined to Kathy on what a minimum septic system costs versus a high-end, and then what community systems cost same type scenario. So it comes down to economics on the smaller size development.
See, and that's all, see, we need all that information in order to make any type of decision.
Comparative analysis.
Yeah.
So, where does that leave us?
Well, I was curious what the timetable could be on stakeholder groups, if you think that's a viable option. I mean, I think it'd be a viable option, at least for the community, for them to understand we're doing the process the right way. But I didn't know what's the timetable on something like that, and where do you start with that? We got an 18-page, we got an 8-page, and then we have, which y'all presented to us about a year ago, which, how many pages was that off the top of your head? That's a pretty big document.
It was about 18.
It was about 18? Is that a viable, I mean, is that something that in a time frame would work? I mean, I'm not putting a deadline to it, but what's, how long would something like that be? Just curious. We have a few
Well, it depends
stakeholders.
how many stakeholder groups and how many meetings you want to have. You want to have one meeting with each stakeholder group and say we've got 4 stakeholder groups. So that's 4 meetings, or do you want 8 meetings? And then, do you want to look at deferring this for 2 months? And I think you can still make the moratorium limit.
I'm just worried if we defer it for 2 months and not, which I think is fine, if we don't have a plan in place and we end up getting, because y'all given us 2 documents and obviously the community is up in arms over both of them. I remember last time. So in those 2 months, if we could have those meetings in place, then I'm all for it. Is that what you're saying, is for defer it for 2 months and have?
Well, rather than having it next month, which is May, have your meetings at the end of June.
Okay.
Your next meeting. So you have a 2-month hiatus here.
And what would we do in between those 2 months?
Hold your stakeholder.
Yeah, okay, good, okay, good.
That's what I'm saying.
Yep.
And then it would go to the council in July.
But then we need to clarify how the
Well, it'd be
stakeholder.
more like August. Yeah.
I kind of, I want them
Because
all.
for, well, I know, if you tell stakeholder meetings,
But if you do have 2 months, you're looking
all of
in
a sudden
July.
it's a
Yeah, I
public
mean, you're
meeting,
looking
you
in
have to
August.
advertise it, I know it's gonna be a planning commission meeting
How's
or whatever.
the crowd up?
You assign smaller groups.
Amended.
That how crowd up is done? Okay.
Yeah, it would, well, no, rather than May, it would go in June, right? 2 months. It was originally going to go in May, it would go in June, and then it would go to the council in July. And we may hit the moratorium, but the council always has the option of
Right,
extending the moratorium.
and they can change, okay.
I mean, if you want true 2 months,
You've got to go to July.
yeah, it doesn't do it to me. You're only adding 1 month.
Right, yeah, it'd be in July.
Right, you're adding 1 month, but
You know
it's a
what?
2 month.
At this point, I think probably play it on the safe side, just based on the feedback that we've gotten.
So you wanted to come back to you all in July, is that correct? And
Right.
in the interim, have some focus groups.
Yep.
Is that what I'm reading?
A lot.
Okay, but I think we're talking about these stakeholder meetings.
Yes.
All right. I don't think they need to be held in isolation. It's not bring this group in and talk to them and find out what they think. And then bring this group in and talk to them and find out what they think. And then we, the staff, meld that information together and say, this is what works, this is what they said. That's not it. Okay, we need stakeholder meetings and a neutral facilitator working with these people, discussing this issue. Hey, this is what I need. How are we going to get it? This is what it costs. Where's that going to come from? Is it doable? Is it not? Maybe it's just not doable. Maybe everybody can agree it just can't happen. I don't know that answer, but we're not going to find out if we don't get the people who care together to talk about it. It's just, we got to,
I hear you. I think we all hear you loud and clear, and that's what we're going to do.
And we can do
Yeah.
that, and we have done that, and I will tell you that we've done it very successfully with our 5 acres group up on Route 9 North and with the Bethany Bank group.
I think
We did hire a professional facilitator, but I will, if it's done right, and I, you know.
it has to, I mean, we need to do it right.
And the professional facilitator will first spend 3 weeks at least talking individually to people, and then he brings one group together, another group, then he brings them all together. And there is a process for doing that, and it's a great process, Noel, and I firmly believe in it, but we're talking 6 months, minimum.
I hear you, and I feel the pressure. All right, I feel it. But again, it's not. I can't cover it more than I did. If you don't do it, I think you're gonna be sorry.
I think with something like this, I think we absolutely have to go in that direction. Whether it takes 6 months or not, I don't know. I mean, I hope it doesn't, but you know, because I know all of us are willing to put in the work, and we will meet as many times as possible.
I just want you to be prepared for the fact that.
I know, and you know, I don't want to.
The community has shown that they can expedite a process and ramp up as needed to get it done. And obviously, this is not an open discussion, but I feel certain that if you can engage the process and get the process scheduled, that the people who care are going to show up for your meetings and they're going to volunteer. And, you know, silence is consensus in one of these processes. And if the people don't care enough and they just can't show up, or they can't get representatives there to give us that point of view, then it won't be represented. But I feel like the passion's here, and this is important enough, and the people are going to come. And I think it can be done in less than 6 months. I could be wrong.
I think it can too, but we'll see. Gariel, does that sound good? Paul?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Again, I can't make a decision based on what I've heard tonight. And I'm all in favor of conservation subdivisions. I think they can be useful in the right situation, but we've got to have more. We just got to.
I make a motion, Lord.
Yeah, you can make a motion.
I'm going to make a motion that we table this issue until we find further scheduling information about the facilitator, and that's it, as far as I'm done.
Is that the motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that way. I don't have a number on this concept.
It's not a really,
doesn't have a number.
it's just,
We really
it's
don't.
just a discussion.
We're just going to give them
and it's not a
guidance.
public-
Yeah, when we're-
it's just
I think.
discussion,
We could just
so
at the beginning.
you just
Yeah.
give us.
Yeah, we're not going to take a vote. This is
Yeah.
just. I mean, I think staff here is
Give
just
us
loud and clear.
direction.
I think y'all got direction. Do you?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
That's it. Unless, I don't think we have anything else.
I was going to say we're going to do a work session in between, but that's
Oh,
not
my
going to.
God.
That's not going to happen. So yeah. Any motion for adjournment?
Maybe we have
What?
one, maybe we have one towards the.
I think. Well,
So what's-
before our
what do
next
you-
meeting.
Well, before the final, where you get all the information together, then we have the final
Well, I'm going to let staff prepare a
agenda.
timetable
Yeah.
on this, knowing what we just said. So I mean, everyone.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
No. Please wait. So one more-
Paul just raised his finger.
One more clarification, just so what is, based on this discussion tonight, what do you expect the next step to be? And what do you see the timeline to that?
And my next question would be, who would you consider a stakeholder?
Yeah, well, if she doesn't say identification of
direction
stakeholder
from-
groups, we don't know, that's
Wait,
what we.
that's kind of yeah. Okay.
Well, I think this is a collaborative effort in
Right.
terms of that. So I would certainly, but I see well, there was a lot of representative, we have developers, we have landowners, we have preservationists, conservationists.
Community activist or citizen involvement. I mean,
MGG
which
and
pretty much
MGG
you can say that's an entire city to
I think
a degree.
I also heard long-term, large landowners.
Absolutely.
you know.
Oh, absolutely.
And
You have to have the
developers.
100-acre plus landowners. You have to have the 20-acre plus.
Builders.
You got to have
So there are a lot of stakeholders. We have had an interested group that's basically followed us through, so I think there's a good core.
Okay.
I would say that. I've noticed repeat attendees, shall we say.
Good. And then that would have to be divided among us since we all can't be at the same.
Well, I think I would have to first hire a facilitator.
Okay.
And let that person set the
Yes.
And that's really how we did it the last
Okay.
time, is you hire a trained facilitator and they have processes that they use. And so we would look to that person for guidance in terms of processes. And then last time, it was fairly clear who the stakeholders were, so that was an easier process to do. But
That's kind of what,
we do have lists of people who have attended meetings, and we can certainly reach out to people and ask for others, and what you also have to limit the size of the groups, and so if you end up with a lot of large groups, you're going to have to do several of those focus meetings or whatever you want to call them. I mean, it's so it has to be structured. We're dealing with a much larger group than usually you deal with 7 in a facilitated group.
Yeah.
We're not dealing with 7, we're dealing with a lot more than that. So it'll be a little different in terms of how we do it, but it's doable. I really have my doubts that it's going to be less than 6 months, but we'll try to identify a facilitator, and just even getting the contract through is like a 2 or 3 week process. I mean, government just works slower, unfortunately, than the private sector, but we'll work as fast as we can, and the idea is to get you back a timeline as soon as we can, which I think is really what you're looking for.
Yes.
And then we'll start to identify stakeholders.
Okay. And Kathy, I think I speak for this group when you see the interest and the passion and the number of exchanges that we've had, either individually with staff or collectively, and the fact that the community is engaged as collectively and individually, you're going to see a lot of interest and involvement from us. How is it managed if there's a situation where there's going to be a stakeholder group meeting and more than 4 or more of us want to attend?
Well, I think typically the stakeholders wasn't, the facilitator took care of most of everything.
That's right.
I mean, it's not really for you all
yeah,
to
I'm about to
participate.
say, maybe you want.
No, not as participate, but as an observer.
They were all public meetings, and people were invited. If they wanted to sit in the back, they could.
Yes, all public.
So we don't have to make a declaration that there may be 4 or more of us at a
No, I think what we can
As
do
long as
is
you don't discuss.
advertise that a stakeholder meeting is going on in the city council chambers at the time, and then we always have people in the audience, okay?
Yeah, okay, great.
Michelle made a good point. Even the CPAC, you guys were together all the time.
Yeah.
Well, on CPAC.
And if you get the right facilitator,
I
he's
want to make
all
sure
of
we're
these.
breaking any rules.
Right.
And then we can't tweet about it either.
Yeah.
I Snapchat. I don't know what it is.
No, your point's perfect. Once you get the facilitator, he's going to tell us the process. We're not going to need to. We're not going to need to tell him. He's going to say, "Here's how we do it. Here's how many I need. Here's how we're going to." All of that.
I'm not worried about that part. I was worried about just making sure we're not breaking a rule
No,
we can't.
we can deal with that part. That's easy.
So I guess now, if you're ready for
we can't.
adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I was just addressing
Can we adjourn?
plea from the community. We can't address
No,
that.
we'll talk to her right now. All right.
Adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.